Colorado puts it in and scores. They got it up the far wing to the streaking Ross Colton, who had the last goal that Colorado had scored for the 6th time in 8 games. The St. Louis Blues have allowed the first goal of the game. Rantanen shoots, scores. Bennington didn't flinch. Had Lehkonen screening him right in front. Rantanen goes under the bar. Rantanen in far wing. Quick pass in front. Lehkonen tucks it in. Score. Blues got caught running around. Lost a guy. Tap in goal. And instead of a power play goal to tie it, they open up the period allowing a goal. And it's 3-1 Colorado. That'll do it. A close one going into the third. But then the championship pedigree of the Avalanche took over. And it's a 4-1 final tonight.
So it's looking a lot like it did last year. That's what doesn't make me feel good about watching the Blues right now. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Alex, the first, 6 games of the year, I watched the Blues and I said to myself, okay, well, at least it's different. They're losing in new ways now. They're going out there and they're kind of suppressing the offense of the opposition. Now, they're not scoring, but they're going about this in a new and, in some ways, interesting, I guess you could argue, way. Well, the last 2 games, it's been what we watched last year. They've been outscored in these 2 games against Vancouver and Colorado by a combined score of 9-1. Now, in this game against Colorado, I thought they played okay for the most part in the first period. The second period, they looked awesome. And then they completely fell off of a cliff where they were doing the exact same thing that they had been doing last year, where you've got the turnovers, you got the head dip moment with the bad goal that goes in, your defense is getting outskated, you're taking bad penalties. It's everything. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong for the Blues in the third period. Alex, am I missing something, or are you seeing what I'm seeing, where we're starting to see some of the same old stuff pop up again?
I feel like I'm living the beginning of Bohemian Rhapsody right now. Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? I'm just making sure everyone was on board with this one.
I know that one. That's a good one.
That's a good one, yeah. The Bon Jovi singing that song, right, T-Bone?
That was about happy things, though, right? This doesn't feel very happy.
No, isn't the lyrics like, Mama, I killed a man?
No.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Read the lyrics, man. From the 6-1. Hey, let's hear the excuses, Alex. There's no excuses on this
Alex,
one.
let's hear them.
Yeah. There's no excuses on this one. Like, you played a average period in the first because you gave up some chances, you gave up the goals, but I thought the Blues actually opened up that first period as the aggressors, and they had, 2 minutes into the game, they had the best scoring chance that they had all night with that tap-in by Braden Shen that just went right into the pads. Second period was a really good period. You pushed Colorado in a period that they succeed in most on home ice, and you outscored them. The third period was when I felt like I was watching the 2022 Blues, because you're down by a goal. Your power play has an opportunity to tie things up. In a power play that was already 0 for 2, you just needed 1 goal. And we're talking about a different hockey game. This is how you steal momentum back. Instead, you can't even get into the zone on that power play. Then you allow the other team, by a bad turnover, to score a goal and put the game out of reach. And from that moment on, when that one mistake was made by Torrey Krug, the game just fell apart. And it did feel a lot like last season's team. And this is the first time that I'm saying this season, because after 7 games, I felt like, man, they're there. It's just a matter of getting things connected. Last night was the head dip moment. It felt like the game was out of reach once you made that big glaring mistake in the third period. And then the team was just like, well, this one's out of reach for us right now. And that is very scary, because that's what Doug Armstrong talked about coming into the season, evaluating this team as. Finding ways to stop the snowball. Finding ways, making sure that this roster had the correct attitude to push this team into the new era. And that did feel eerily similar last night to the inconsistency and the attitude issue that the Blues had. So I got no excuses. That was a game after 4 days off that you probably should have come out and put it to Colorado in the first 2 periods, and instead you let them take advantage, and you didn't fight back into that hockey game.
That's exactly how I felt. It was a lot of last year reminding of, and I think at times we've seen one thing from last year in a game, where whether it be turnovers, I think that's been a constant theme this year. Power play struggles, constant theme this year. But last night was the first game where I was like, yeah, that felt like everything from last year. The head dip, the turnovers. I thought Bennington once again gave them a chance to win that hockey game. And again, the inability to play 3 periods of hockey. That's the part that is just mind-boggling to me is the fact of the matter that continues to be an issue to where they can't put together 3 solid periods of hockey. And again, I think that's been a common theme this year too. So I've been screaming from the mountaintops from the beginning of this year. They feel like a team that's going to be about 500, too inconsistent to really put anything together. But this is where I'm starting to wonder if we really start to see that snowball start rolling downhill here for the St. Louis Blues. We'll see if they can turn it around, but there was a lot of reminders of last year's team, and we saw how quickly that fell off the rails.
That stat still remains untouched that Curbs put out yesterday. The Blues have yet to have a lead change in a hockey game, which means they have yet to take the lead
and give it up
or give up the lead this season, which means when a game gets out of reach, they either aren't able to climb back in it or they're not able to hold on to it.
Whoever scores the first goal wins.
Pretty much.
That's it.
That's how this works.
Interesting.
And frankly, the power play is the biggest reason why.
So let's get to that first. So yesterday, I was listening to the post-game show. Joey Vitale and Chris Kerber, not the Alex portion. Joey Vitale and Chris Kerber were fantastic with their post-game breakdown.
Man, I thought he was going to compliment me on the great BK stat dive I did in that game, but instead, nope, let's go with this.
No, I wait until I'm like, okay, now we're going to hear from Joey and Kerbs. No, I listened to the whole thing. I think you were great.
Wow.
Joey did say something that I found interesting. He was talking about how the Blues at 5-on-5 have been basically playing teams even much of the season. Now, not the underlying stuff, not any of that, but the actual goals produced by either side. It's kind of been even-ish for the most part this year. The problem is special teams. Here's what he had to say.
But once they can get this power play going, I think the 5-on-5 play is encouraging because how you're keeping yourself in a position in these games, once you get that power play going, I'm telling you, you're going to start winning some hockey games. The PK's been great. 5-on-5 scoring for the most part has been pretty decent. Get a power play going, get a couple, put your opponent back behind their heels, behind the 8-ball a little bit, and you're going to start winning some hockey games.
Now, I don't agree that the 5-on-5 goal scoring has been decent. You're towards the bottom of the league so far this year. In fact, at 5-on-5, the only team that scored fewer goals than you is the San Jose Sharks. So I will push back a little bit on that part of it.
But they're getting their chances at 5-on-5.
His point remains fair. They've been outscored 15-10 at 5-on-5. That's not ideal, but it's really not all that bad over the course of the first, 8 games of the season? Been outscored by 5 at 5-on-5. You can make that up on special teams. You should be able to make that up on special teams. But not for this team so far this year. On the power play this season, the Blues are 1 for 25. Let me say that one more time. The Blues, with a man advantage so far this year, are 1 for 25.
We should start declining those.
The average power play in the NHL this year scores roughly 20% of the time. If the Blues had been converting at a 20% clip, which again is not top 10, that is the average in the NHL, you would have 5 more goals on the season this year from the power play. You know what you've been outscored by so far this year at 5-on-5, Alex? 5 goals so far. You'd be an even team. We're talking about an even team if you just had an average power play this year. But they have been so far below average that they're the worst power play unit in the league. And so far at this point in the season, the second worst power play in the history of this franchise. The only other time in this franchise's history in which they have scored 1 or fewer goals on the power play through 8 games was 1973.
What happened that year?
We're talking about they ended up with a 6 overall pick. We're talking about one of the most inept, unopportunistic, just horrible power play units that we've ever seen in the history of watching the St. Louis Blues.
Which is insane because the power play was supposed to be the strength for this team coming into this season. They felt like that they actually had a little bit more evened out units. You had some big bodies that were in front of the net. You had your power play quarterback that said he was motivated coming into the season, and that guy has 0 points on the season so far. Now, I did the deep dive. Now, if you were actually listening to the postgame, you heard the best part of the night, which was me. That 1 for 25 power play that we're talking about, so it's had the opportunity to take the lead in a hockey game 7 separate times.
Oh, God.
And they haven't scored on those. So 7 different times this season, you've had the chance to take the lead in a hockey game. And remember, you haven't given up the lead when you've taken it. You've missed that. You've had the chance to tie the game twice. And not only have you not scored in those 2 opportunities, but you gave up a goal to the opposition 2 times.
On both of those?
On both of them, less than 2 minutes after that power play. It was 39 seconds and then 1 minute and 38 seconds that you gave up a goal when you could have tied it on the power play.
Yikes.
And then when you've had the chance to extend the lead, to make it a 2-goal lead. You didn't score and you gave up a goal at the end of that power play. So this power play not only has been bad, it's been costing you games. 10 times this season, you've been able to put away games, and you've missed out those opportunities. That's, to me, the biggest problem right now. We talk about momentum. We talk about how this team can sway it in their path. Sorry, brain fart here. I'm on a roll. Shut up, BK.
No, I mean, these are great numbers. You're really getting to, like, I like all of this, but we just had a short circuit moment.
We're honestly talking about 3 other games that you're coming away with at minimum another point.
Yeah.
And instead, your power play has put you in a position for this team to have the head dip moment and say, well, not only can we not score on the power play, but now we're giving up the goal to the other side. That's a problem.
And the problem for the Blues is you're putting yourself so far behind the 8 ball.
Yeah.
Like, I understand, we said this yesterday, the NHL Central Division, it's not very good around you, so it's not as if you're, 10 points behind the third place team in the division. That's not the case. But you're putting yourself now into a position where the team, the feel around the team, is becoming more negative by the day because of the lack of offense that you're generating on the power play. The craziest part, man, I thought the power play got some good chances last night. They're just not going in. Earlier this year, it wasn't generating chances, and now you're getting the chances, and they're not going in.
But you know why they're not going in? It's because you don't have that one-timer threat. The shots that you're taking are going right into the gut of the goaltender.
Shin last night. Shin's opportunity, he puts it on. He has a really good opportunity. If he's got a one-time shot, boom, it's right off of his stick. Instead, he waits for a second, takes an extra moment to see it, then tries to shoot. It might have been deflected, not totally sure what happened on that one, but ends up going up and it ricochets and goes completely out of play.
You watch the best power plays, the best power
threat.
They have threats on both sides. Joey talks about this all the time. They have power play or one-time threats on both sides. The goal of that power play is to get the 4 guys that are in front of the net to shift far side, to chase the puck holder so that they can make the pass and get the one-time shot off as the goaltender is moving post to post. They don't do that. They're so one-sided, one-dimensional in the terms of they get the shot, they got to dust it off and then take the shot. The goaltender's already set, and you're getting it right into the pads.
Anybody out there that thinks we're being too hard on this team, just go ahead and listen to what Paul Bissonnette had to say last night.
They've turned over the puck 100 times that period. I could have dressed as a defenseman. Pathetic, man. That was a pawn hockey game right there.
Our goalie maybe should have stopped it too.
On that one?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to comment on that.
Well, you see the puck fluttering. How hard the shot was.
Well, I think he was so distracted at the fact that the defenseman there
was slow.
Talk always talks about as a defenseman angling off going forward. He had that angle on him, and then all of a sudden he just started backing up, and then the wheels fell off.
Are you suggesting that Biz could have played goalie tonight?
I'm not. Yeah, okay. He can, whatever you want.
I'd love to really believe you could have played D out there.
I think I could have survived that period and not looked out of place as far as how the St. Louis Blues defense played.
I'm with you.
We could leave it
I'm
at that.
with you.
Thank you.
There you go. I'm glad you're here, though.
I mean, go back. If St. Louis D want to get offended by that, they should go back and sit down as a team and watch that period on how many turnovers they had from the blue line with complete control of the puck.
Well, I'll be turning on the next episode of Spittin' Chicklets to see what he's got to say a follow-up with that.
Not great, you know?
I mean, look, he's talking about that Ross Colton goal. Where Ross Colton...
Yeah, of course he is. Of course it's Ross. God! Ross Colton, he was right there, man!
I told you about him. I wish you'd listen.
Hey, you know how many people we had on the text line for the month that we spent on Ross Colton? Ross Colton's not that good of a player. What do you want Ross Colton for? He can't do anything. Traded a second-round draft pick for him.
Hey, we got Kevin Hayes, man. You know?
$4 million. Could have been so good on this team. For Alex and T-Bone on BK, we got to get to Joey Vitale next. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. And right now, we're happy to go out to the 101 ESPN hotline to be joined by Joey Vitale. He's the Blues analyst for 101 ESPN. He was in Denver last night for the Blues loss on the road at Colorado. He joins us as he does each and every Thursday here on BK and Ferrario. Joe, appreciate the time as always, man. How you doing on this beautiful Thursday morning?
Joey!
Doing great, fellas. I appreciate the pump up. Needed it today. Got it late this morning, 3:30. We finally got in from Denver. It ended up becoming almost an 8 o'clock start in Denver, and so a quick turnaround into today. But I tell you what, it's a beautiful day here in St. Louis, and hoping for some Blues wins starting tomorrow night. We got to start piling this up in a better direction.
Joe, I didn't even get to ask you last night on the broadcast, but how was Halloween, my man? Did you get a big boatload of candy?
Halloween was great. My kids, they were a little unwilling at first, but then they finally buckled. I got my only rule of Halloween. People have lots of Halloween rules. Stay together. Make sure you check in. I don't have any rules like that. I got the only rule is make sure every single Reese's peanut butter cup in your bag comes into my belly by the end of the night. That's really all that matters. I got a nice little stash in the freezer. I basically go through all my kids' candy bags. I get all the Reese's peanut butter cups. They become mine. So all in all, I think I got about 13 or 14 packages. So I would say my Halloween was great, Alex. Thank you for asking.
Nailed it. That many Reese's Pieces buttercups, you're good to go.
Yeah, Reese's peanut butter cups are easily number one. Those are the top of the list.
I don't know about that one.
Are you a Snickers guy?
I'm a Snickers guy. I'm a Twix guy too. What the hell's that supposed to mean?
That makes sense for you.
Have a Snickers. You're not yourself when you don't eat.
Snickers are good. You need a little texture. You kind of feel like you're getting a little protein in your system by having the nuts. So I
need some nuts in the chocolate.
I got it. Yeah, no, it's all good. No, it was wonderful. It was a great night. It was a little chilly, which was a little unfortunate.
A little chilly, Joe. It was freezing.
So, Joe, I
35 degrees.
I took Adelaide out, and she was out there for like 15 minutes and said, "Daddy, cold. I want to go in." I'm like, "Oh, okay, we're good."
Honestly, though, I think that's. I first when I was like heading out there, this is kind of a bummer for the kids. From the parents, I think it actually worked out perfectly because you really only want to be out doing this like 30, 45 minutes. Then you want to come back. So I tell you what, by 8:30, I was cracking open a bottle of wine with my wife on the porch, and the kids were already kind of trading candy upstairs. So it actually worked out pretty well.
Yep.
All right, Joe, let's talk a little bit about this hockey team. I was listening to your breakdown last night, and you were talking about, hey, at 5-on-5, this really isn't so bad right now. Unfortunately, the power play hasn't come through. We just got done finished discussing that as well. What's up with this power play, Joe? What's your diagnosis of it?
Well, I talked to Braden Shen about this too on the plane ride. He's always he's so full of knowledge of the game, and he's got such a good temperature for the game, and he just kind of wanted to see, hey, what am I seeing from up top? What are you thinking? And I just asked a ton of questions to him, and I think we connected on one thing in particular, which was. I mean this sincerely. I'm not just saying this because I'm biased, but this team is not as far off as I think a lot of people may think. And I know you look at the score last night as a bit of a shellacking 4-1, but that game was a lot tighter than you think. You look at that game heading into the third period, they had a power play. It's a one-goal game. One shot in this game is tied up. I mean, it's just been that close. Vancouver was a pretty lopsided one, but you look at their good performance in Calgary. They played good enough to win in Winnipeg. They had a couple of posts, missed a few breakaways in Winnipeg. So the point of it all is that this team, I know that they're in a little bit of down the dumps, and they're finding themselves on the outside looking in. But it's really, really close. I think that the 5-on-5 scoring has evaporated a little bit. I think that they're still getting used to this new defensive system, the new defensive scheme, and they're struggling to find 5-on-5 offense, but not because they're not getting quality chances. I mean, you look at that game last night. Braden Shen on the back door, that could have been a tap in. They ended up missing. Colton Parayko hit the post. Sammy Blais had a wonderful grade A chance. And these three chances, guys, are all in the game 0-0. So you put one of those away, and all of a sudden this may be a completely different game. Or maybe in the power play in the third period, you get back and you tie the game, and it's a completely different game as well. So with that being said, 5-on-5, the chances are there, and they know it's close. And they got to start taking advantage of that, and they know that. But the power play, to me, this is where the Blues are going to make the playoffs this year if they can figure out how to get this power play humming. Because defensively, it's looked, again, pretty good. I mean, Colorado, one of the best teams in the league, they had them at one goal all the way to the third period. I think the second period against Colorado last night was maybe some of the best defensive hockey we've seen St. Louis play. all the speed, all the weapons of Colorado. They play a fast transition game, especially in Colorado, and they didn't give that McKinnon line a sniff. I mean, completely just disappeared from that period was McKinnon and Rantanen line. So that kind of goes to show you how well this defensive structure can look. When you play heavy defense and you're not going to get a lot of 5-on-5 scoring, and maybe you're not taking advantage of the chances 5-on-5, this is where you have to win games or your power play. You have to figure out a way to get a goal, get two. Maybe at the end of the night you win 3-1 with empty netter, and the first 2 goals were those power play ones. And yes, you're not getting a lot 5-on-5, but you have to get this power play going. I think they're still trying to figure out a way to establish one-timer. You have Jakub Vrana in the lineup last night. They didn't really get as many looks to him as they were hoping for. And the other thing that I noticed, and you just kind of compare the power plays last night, and it's not really fair to compare, but it kind of goes to show you what an elite power play looks like and what the Blues have to get to. But you look at the Blues, a little bit stagnant, not a ton of movement. They're very positionally sound, looking for the perfect pass. On the flip side, let's look at one of the best power plays in the league like we saw last night. Constant movement. I mean, McKinnon's at the blue line being the quarterback. Then he's on his one-timer spot on the right side. Then at one point he was on the left side by the goal line. Then he was behind it. I mean, there's just constant motion with those high-skilled players. That's what a good power play looks like. And for St. Louis, it's really about how do we just take that next step to try to get there.
Joe, you mentioned Brayden Schenn, and this is a guy who I know does so much more than people see on the stat sheet. And after a game, they're like, the captain, Brayden Schenn's not doing anything. There's a lot more that he's doing. But it does seem like he's going through it a little bit. Do you get that vibe talking to him?
Definitely, Alex. I think that, he's fighting it a little bit. He was a bit quieter last night. And I think that he's, as a captain, you no longer just feel the woes of your own personal world, right? When you have a C on that sweater, you take on the personality of the team. When the team's doing well, you have to figure out a way to how do we keep this thing going. And the toughest part of being a captain is when you're in situations like this where the team is struggling and you're struggling to find your game. That's what's been really hard. I think for Brayden, it's been a transition. I think he's the first one to tell you. You go back to the home opener against the Seattle Kraken a couple weeks ago. We're over there at Union Station as a pep rally. They're on stage with the Cubs and I. We took a card to go from the Enterprise to Union Station, and I just asked him, how's the adjustment been? And he just said, honestly and frankly, he said, listen, it's just been different. I'm not used to doing this. He goes, look, it's an opening game that I'm on the ice in 2.5 hours. I'm going to Union Station for a party. It's what captains do. It's the new responsibility that you take upon yourself. So he fully embraces it. But let's not kid ourselves. It's an adjustment. It's a big-time adjustment. It's not just your world anymore. You have to be looking after talking to the media. You have to be doing pep rallies. You have to be the first one when they have, Halloween parties for, children at Missouri Baptist to come over, and you have to be present. You have to be engaging. I mean, there's a different level of responsibility when you wear. And I think he's feeling that. I think he's really, and it's going to take some time, but he is adjusting to that. And I think that as this season continues, I know for a fact he would love to get on the board, but more importantly, as selfless of a player as he is, he wants to see this team kind of get back on the right tracks. But at the end of the day, as a captain, the best way to help your team is to take care of yourself and take care of your game. And I think right now he's just continuing to sort that out in his own head.
Joe, final question that I've got for you. You mentioned last night at the end of your breakdown post-game that you think we could see a few different players in the lineup whenever they take the ice once again against the New Jersey Devils. What kind of changes do you foresee taking place with this team, if any?
Well, one's going to be the goaltender because we have another back-to-back this weekend. Who will get the start tomorrow against the Devils? Who's going to get the start on the following night against the Montreal Canadiens? They do look a lot into past history. You looked at Jordan Binning's last road trip, who typically had really good games in Vancouver, and that's why Joel Hofer got ended up getting a Calgary game. So I think they're going to see a goaltender shift here a little bit, at least get someone else in the net. That's the obvious one. I think Scott Perunovich is a player they need to get in there. They got to figure out a way to get him more minutes, get him more reps. I don't know if I loved Tyler Tucker last night. I thought at times he looked great. I think at other times, he's still trying to find his game. It's a hard thing for a young player to kind of come in, come out. You're trying to constantly impress your coaches and impress your teammates, and you're trying to do everything you can. But this league is a very tough league, and that was a very good team they played last night in Colorado. But I think at times he got a little bit exposed. So it would not shock me one bit to see Scott Prudovich back in the lineup, maybe a Robert Bortuzzo. Keep in mind, BK, they went to that 11-7 set in Calgary. They did the same in Vancouver. I get that. But in Calgary, it certainly worked pretty well with Bortuzzo and Scott Prudovich in the mix there. So that's kind of one adjustment, I think. I think you got to get Alexandrov in there. I think, he's a forechecking responsible player where I think they need a little bit more of that. Jakub Vrana ended up becoming the scratch in that Canadian swing trip because he was a little bit too much on the perimeter. I think Craig Berube wanted to see him dig his heels in a little bit, get to the front, work hard on the forecheck. Did he do enough of that last night to stay in the lineup? I'm not quite sure. So I think Alexandrov could be another little shakeup right there. And I think this head coach is going to continue to shake things up from a lineup from top to bottom. How do you find the chemistry? Adam Gaudette is a player that a lot of people are talking about. He's having an incredible start in the American Hockey League, former Northeastern Husky. I think he's got 8 goals on the year so far. So is it a call-up situation where you got to run a hot hand like what Colorado did with Tufte the other day? He was ripping up the American League. You got to give a guy an opportunity. And possibly we've seen Adam Gaudette at some point this weekend or maybe even to next week with how well he's playing down there. So with the team struggling like the Blues have over the last 2, again, it's close, but you're not getting the results you want. I think it's only the head coach's responsibility to continue to move things around and shift things around until you get the result you need.
Joe, appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoy yourself in this upcoming homestand, which is going to be nice for you to be able to be at home for a little while. We appreciate the time as always. We'll talk with you again next week, my friend.
Hey, sounds great, BK and Alex. And Tanner, thank you guys. You guys have a great day.
See you, Joey. That's Joey Vitale joining us as he does each and every Thursday throughout the hockey season here on BK and Ferrario. Always appreciate his time. If you missed any of it, check it out on the podcast page after the show today at 101ESPN.com or the free 101 ESPN app. It's always presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Alex, if they end up sitting Jakub Vrana in this game, I'm not even, I'm done being upset about anything they do. It is what it is. I think that at that point, it'll probably be time for us to have a conversation early next week about whether or not they're going to waive Jakub Vrana.
Yeah. I mean, you got to always have those conversations if you're not seeing him in the lineup. And look, he wasn't noticeable last night. And I mean, what Craig, like it or not, if you don't like the decisions that Craig Berube makes and what they want out of him, if he's not that guy, it's the head coach, and he's telling the player he needs this from him, and if he's not going to provide that, he's not going to play.
If they think Nikita Alexandrov helps them more than Jakub Vrana, and I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I disagree with it. I think Vrana in the right position can help this team. I think you need his offense because I think they struggle offensively, so that's my personal opinion on it. But clearly the coaching staff has more information on this. They know more about the player. They know more about how he's fitting into the team. Clearly, they're not seeing enough from that player. If they don't view it as him being a piece that's going to help them long term, then bring somebody else up who can. Yeah. And whether that's somebody that's already in the system, bringing up a Gaudette, who Joey Vitale just mentioned, bringing up a Bolduc, maybe it's going to the outside and finding somebody that's currently a free agent that you can bring in for a couple $1 million. It opens up some cap space that you can potentially play with. You tried the Vrana thing. It appears to be not working very well for them, and there's probably going to come a point in time if it continues heading in this direction where he might not be a part of the roster long term. That's pure speculation by me, but I think we can all see the writing on the wall if in 4 games he is sitting up in the press box 3 separate times.
Yeah, and I mean, look, Alexandrov really isn't the answer. Alexandrov becomes a 4th-line player for you, and you're pushing Sammy Blais back up and trying to get more out of him. That's fine, but you're getting slower in that sense. This is just the way that this offense is going to work is what Joe just mentioned. You're forechecking, you're winning the puck battles, you're getting the puck in deep, and you're coming away with it. And if Verana's not going to do that, then the shot's not going to matter. If you're not holding the puck, the shot doesn't matter. So you bring up an Adam Gaudette. Maybe you put a Zachary Bolduc in this position to see if he can start learning the system a little bit more. But yeah, if you're in the press box once again, it's probably going to be a mutual decision that it's like, hey, this isn't working out for either of us.
And I think the Blues have learned their lessons in this regard. I think they learned their lesson last year of trying to make things work longer than maybe what they should have, and it was totally understandable. The players weren't as replaceable as Jakub Vrana was last year.
Probably learned their lesson because they did this with Mike Hoffman.
That was the one that I was going to bring up.
Okay, sorry.
That was the real lesson to be learned, is they continued trying and trying and trying and trying, and eventually you hit your head on the wall so many times you just break your skull. Yeah. And that's what they're not going to do this year. They're not going to keep hitting their head against the wall and hoping that something ends up working.
Just for people that are frustrated with this, and look, I get it. Like, you need more offense, and this is a guy that provides the offense. look at what Colorado did last night. Like, they got a player that basically is about as similar as to Jakub Vrana as you can ask in Jonathan Drouin. They signed him to a contract to bring him in because they thought his offense could be good in the top 6. It hasn't translated. He's played 8 games. He doesn't have a goal. He's only got an assist. And their coach basically said, we need him to play into our system. And he was a healthy scratch last night. Like, this isn't like every other team in the NHL is going to be playing Jakub Vrana in their top 6. If you're not matching the identity of what the coach wants, you're not going to play.
Yeah, and Jonathan Drouin signed this offseason for a vet minimum deal, so it was a little less
because
money.
it hasn't worked elsewhere that he was.
Tomas Tatar was also a healthy scratch last night, too, right?
But that was the tufty that Joey mentioned. They wanted him in because they wanted more size. Bednar said we needed to get to the front of the net more.
Right, but that guy makes $1.5 million. Yeah. Like, that's another player that they're
bring
deciding.
in guys that do what the coach wants.
Exactly.
That's what this is.
This team right now is a player who I think helps you, but he doesn't fit. And if you're trying to continue to have this square peg fit into a round hole, it's just not going to fit, guys. It's not. And eventually, I think they're probably going to have to make that decision. Again, that is assuming that he's somebody that ends up sitting up in the press box once again on Friday. You just need more flexibility with this roster. You got to. Alexandrov is not the answer. I think we know that. He's not a guy that you want in this lineup regularly.
Probably a placeholder until you decide if Bolduc's ready, or you do give Adam Gaudette, or you bring back Nathan Walker.
Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. We'll get to questions and answers, but next, I think there are 2 people who clearly changed their legacies with their win of the World Series yesterday. T-Bone had one more to add to the list earlier today. We'll talk about that next here on 101 ESPN.
Tara Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night, the Blues fall to the Colorado Avalanche 4-1, and they'll be back in action tomorrow night as they return to home ice. They'll be taking on the New Jersey Devils, and we'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 7. And tonight here on 101 ESPN, we've got Thursday Night Football for you as the Steelers take on the Titans, and we've got pregame coverage starting at 6:30. This Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your road shop 24/7 at londoff.com, londoffautoPlex.com. Are you kidding me?
It's happened! The Texas Rangers win the World Series!
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. That's what it sounded like last night on Fox as the final call was put in. The Rangers end up winning the World Series. Not a whole lot of drama in that one. They won it in 5 games.
Imagine getting shut out in a do-or-die World Series game.
I mean, for 6 innings, it was a really compelling baseball game. Zach Gallen went out there and pitched his ass off. And then the Rangers got to their bullpen, and it was over.
All those winning players in the World Series.
T-Bone said, I think it was at the beginning of this series, and we all agreed with him, but I think he was the first to say it. Hey,
7 games.
Whoever the first is to break through the other team's bullpen, that's going to be where this series is decided. And that was exactly the case. The Rangers' bullpen, it bent, but it didn't break, and the Diamondbacks' bullpen broke. And when their bullpen broke, the Rangers are the winners, and that's the way that it goes. The victors get to write the history, and they are the victors. So when you have history that is written after a series like this, we talk a little bit about legacy, right? I find that to be the more interesting part of this because, frankly, the series wasn't all that compelling in my mind. Corey Seager just became one of the best postseason players that we've seen in the last decade. I mean, when I think about playoff performers in recent memory, David Ortiz jumps off the page. Madison Bumgarner, from a pitching perspective, is a guy that jumps off the page. Those are the 2 guys in like the last decade that are that way. I mean, David Freese had one of the all-time great runs, but it was 1 year where it was confined for him. Some of these other players that we're talking about, it was multiple seasons. Corey Seager was amazing in 2020 for the Dodgers in that fraudulent season that happened during the pandemic. But he was awesome, so I'll give him the credit.
So
where
hold on,
it's
it was a fake World Series during a fake season, but he was awesome for that fake team and the fake season of the fake year.
So since the stats technically count, we'll go ahead and give him the credit for it.
Good.
This year, he was once again the reason why the Rangers, probably the main reason, why they ended up winning the World Series. So he wins MVP. He is the 4th player with multiple World Series MVP trophies since the award was first given out in 1955. The others, Alex, are unbelievable names to be associated with. Sandy Koufax, Bob Gibson, and Mr. October, Reggie Jackson. He is the only player other than Reggie Jackson to do it with multiple teams.
Yep.
That is one hell of a legacy, man, to be able to leave on this sport is, hey, when this guy's healthy, he's like the best player in October that you've ever seen. It's unbelievable.
I mean, like, we all saw the graphics that Fox had of calling him the new Mr. October. The same games played, we're talking about more home runs, more total bases, and the same RBIs, and you're 29 years old. Like, that's the other thing. You're 29 years old right now, and you've put up these incredible numbers. He's built a legacy that is considered a guy that when you get to the postseason, you know you've got a chance to win it all because you have that player. And if you think of other teams just in recent histories because of that, like you're thinking of the Dodgers. Now his numbers don't look great, but when you had Clayton Kershaw dealing, you're like, oh, man, the Dodgers are going to be tough to deal with. When you look at the Braves, even though they've only won it once.
I think Yordan Alvarez is on this list. Jose Altuve
is on this list. Yeah, I mean,
Bryce Harper is now on this list.
For the longest time, Carlos Correa was on this list with the Astros because of he and Altuve. So what you have created if you're Corey Seager is being 29 years old, still having probably 5, 6, 7 more years, and being already considered one of the best playoff performers.
Now, the other guy that is being discussed because of what he was able to accomplish during this World Series and what he was able to do in his first year back inside of the dugout is Bruce Bochy. He is one of now 6 managers to win 4 World Series in his career. The only other to do so, though, in the last 50 years, so the modern era of baseball, is Joe Torre. And he did it with the Yankees, where they were just outspending everybody at a time where the Yankees were just on a completely different level than everybody else in the sport. TLR won 3. He did so in the last modern era of baseball as well. Guys, is Bruce Bochy the best manager of this era? Is that now what we have to claim him to be because of what he was able to accomplish in his first year down in Texas?
I would say so. I mean, first year in Texas, I mean, it's not like you were gifted a New York Yankees team where you spent all this, like they spent a lot of money, but think about it, like you lost your best pitcher.
Oh, he deserves a lot of credit for them being able to navigate through this postseason.
And even though
Their bullpen was...
and then you lose Max Scherzer, who you acquire in the trade deadline. But I mean, even beyond,
DeGrom and Scherzer both out for the postseason, basically.
But
I mean,
even
Scherzer,
beyond
even when he pitched, wasn't all that
great.
great.
Look at the roster that you had in San Francisco. I mean, like they were good players, but it's not like you had the elite of the elite in almost every category.
You got the best out of that team.
Yeah. So I mean, I look at Bruce Bochy, and frankly, I think what he has done in his career is more impressive because of the rosters that he's had and where he's moved. I look at that as more impressive than what Corey Seager has already accomplished, because Bruce Bochy has some type of secret sauce in making locker rooms and clubhouses click so that they can become a team that wins a World Series.
Yeah, it's incredible what he's done, and I think I would say he probably is the best manager of this generation because of what Alex just said. Every one of the teams that he's had that's gone on to win a World Series have never really been viewed as like, hey, this team is like just built for October. They are they're like the Atlanta Braves, a dominant offense, great front end starters, and a great bullpen.
Every team he won the World Series with was a wild card team, correct? Because the three teams that he did it with in San Francisco were, and then this team in Texas was as well.
I think that's right.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think the Giants ever had first place.
But yeah,
2010. 2010, they won the division that year.
They did?
Yep. They won the division that year. They won 92 games, though, so it's not like they were
a Cardinals division
overwhelmingly great. Exactly. Yeah, it was an NL Central type.
Doesn't really count.
Yeah.
2012, they were a division winner as well.
Yeah,
What am I doing over here? My bad. BK's over here.
Are we sure the other one wasn't
2014, though? They definitely were the wild
They were a wild card. They were a wild card. I'm looking at it.
I'm misremembering that. But anyways, the last two teams that he's won the World Series with.
That's a good nickname. Corey Seager's Mr. October. You're Misremember.
But either way, I mean, most of those teams, they were not viewed as like a dominant, hey, they're going to be the pick to win the World Series. They never were. And he's able to manage his way through it because, like, I think back to those teams, and though you had, like, Travis Ishikawa that helped them get past the Cardinals in, what was that, 2012 or 2014, you think of those teams, and it was, okay, you got Buster Posey, you've got Sandoval. That was really it in the lineup. But you had Crawford as well, if I remember correctly. But then you always had one starting pitcher that was dominant. This year it was Eovaldi. In that run, it was Bumgarner. And then you had a bullpen that you looked at and went, okay, this bullpen's okay. They got a couple of back-end relievers, but they've got to piece it together the rest of the way. And that's been the formula for him every postseason that he's won. And to be able to do that is incredible, because I thought going into this, like, I thought their offense could help carry them, but I thought at some point in this run, because they had to start in the wild card round, I thought at some point in this run the bullpen would come back to haunt them, and it really never did. They made the game a little bit more interesting in Game 4, but this bullpen was just fine. Like, he did a great job of being able to use those pieces, using starters as bullpen arms, and find a way through it.
It's all about the vibes, man. It is. It's all about the vibes. And Bruce Bochy has good vibrations going through his clubhouse anytime that he makes it into the postseason. And I say that kind of as a joke, but also kind of seriously. Like, I think that that's part of the secret sauce with Bruce Bochy as your manager is he kind of makes guys feel good. He makes them have more confidence because he's the guy that is pulling all of the strings. So credit to him. I think he at this point has to be stated as the best manager of this generation, and that's a Hall of Fame resume that he's put together now based on what he's done as the manager. Those are two guys that are getting a lot of the discussion though nationally. I do think there's one other player that we need to talk about, and T-Bone mentioned it before the show today. I heard some discussion about it last night as like the fourth or fifth most interesting piece of the World Series. You can make an argument this is maybe the most important piece when it relates back to the Cardinals. What Nathan Eovaldi was able to do this postseason for them by winning, 5 games in this postseason run for the Rangers? Man, that is the kind of thing that Bruce Bochy needs. He had Madison Bumgarner. That was the formula for them in the 2012 and 2014 run was, hey, we're just going to ride this horse all the way to the finish line. He did that again with Nathan Eovaldi as his number one starter, which is nothing short of remarkable, man. What a run for Nathan Eovaldi this year in the postseason as well.
Yeah, Eovaldi should be viewed as, maybe not at the same level as Bumgarner, but should be viewed as one of the best postseason pitchers in this era of baseball because he's been dominant. I mean, 5-0 in the postseason. He only had one start that was really bad, and that was Game 1 of the World Series, 4 2/3, 5 earned runs. But his team ended up winning that game. The rest, 6 2/3, 1 earned, 7, 1 earned, 6, 3 earned, 6 1/3, 2 earned, 6 innings last night, no earned. And by the way, that was an incredible tightrope dance by Nathan Eovaldi
It
last
was
night.
amazing.
I mean, he's been great, and I looked up his postseason numbers. 3 ERA in his career in 17 games and 12 starts. He's 9-3 in the postseason, and he's been incredible. He's holding opponents to a 574 OPS in October. That's what you need from a guy that's and he is a starter / a bullpen arm, depending on how you need him. If they had a healthy DeGrom and a healthy Scherzer, he's probably a bullpen arm for them in that series. So
if
he's
I could
incredible.
tell you, if I told you right now, the guy that you signed to be your second best starter this offseason does for you during the regular season, and then you hope he can do for you in the postseason what Nathan Eovaldi was able to do this year for Texas. You're signing up, right? 25 starts for them this year, 145 innings, 3.6 ERA. The second best starter that you signed this offseason gives you that next year. You're in?
Yeah, I would say so. I don't know how you wouldn't be in on something like that.
I think the question is, like, can he do in the postseason what Eovaldi has? And that's, we just don't know. We don't know, because most of the thing that was important about them signing Eovaldi, he had this history. We've seen him raise his game in the postseason before, and so it was a known with him. It's so unfortunate that he's not available this offseason, because he would be the ideal candidate for the Cardinals to sign.
And I know a lot of people looked at Eovaldi when he was a free agent, I think last year, if I remember correctly, and they said, well, he's got an injury history. Yeah, but that dude's always available in October. I mean, you just said he pitched, 140 innings? He covered, I think, what was it? Double checking here, but he would have covered basically like 180 to 200 innings this year based on the numbers he's able to pitch in October. I mean, he's incredible. Though he may deal with injuries in the regular season, he somehow finds a way to be healthy by the time you get to October and then take his game to the next level.
He ended up with 35 innings this postseason.
So about 170.
And frankly,
right around 180
that's what this team really needs to focus on this offseason. Like, as much as you want that star-studded stuff, I would really like to have guys who can do it on the biggest stage.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Coming up next, we'll get to a brief edition of Questions and Answers here on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. Let's start with this from the 636. Guys, we've talked a little bit about the call-ups for the Blues. Have Bolduc or Dean been performing well enough in Springfield to deserve a promotion? Alex, I'm going to be totally candid. I have not looked at what they have done so far this year.
I updated every second intermission on our broadcast, but I haven't watched them play. Bolduc's got a goal and an assist, and I think it's like a -3, and Dean has an assist and is a -5. But these guys are playing on the third line for the Springfield Thunderbirds. So, no, they're not playing to the level that you would call them up and say, welcome to the NHL, guys. I mean, you got two 20-year-olds that are playing in professional hockey for the first time. So, no, as bad as this season is, you only bring them up if this is a rebuild. And if you're not focused on this being a rebuild, which they're not, you're not going to stunt their growth. You're going to keep them in the minors. You're going to let them play the season out as it goes. And as soon as they start to improve, then you give them a cookie at the NHL level.
You know, I wonder if we see is Nathan Walker.
You'll see Nathan Walker and you'll see Adam Gaudette.
Yeah.
If there's anybody you're calling up, it would be those two, because Walker, we all know how he plays. Adam Gaudette was just named the player of the month in the AHL with 9 goals. Those are the guys you're calling up.
Gaudette has NHL experience as well. He's played with Vancouver. He's been in Chicago. He spent basically all of 2 years ago with Ottawa. Now, didn't put up big numbers with any of these teams.
He's a third or fourth line player.
But has NHL experience nonetheless. Those are probably the guys that you're calling up right now. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 618. Guys, if you're Chicago, why would you trade a second-round pick for Sweat instead of a third-round pick for Chase Young? Feels like they botched this. I'm surprised by how much blowback this trade has been receiving. I thought it was a more than reasonable deal for them. Now, you have to re-sign him, and that gives the player a ton of leverage, so you're going to have to overpay him. He's going to end up getting way more money than what Montez Sweat is actually worth. But that being said, he doesn't have the injury history that Chase Young has. There have always been questions about Chase Young's work ethic, not in terms of like, is this guy going to care about football? But he does, according to some of the reports that have come out of Washington, freelance more than what you'd like. And there are coaches that just don't want that on their team, right or wrong. So I think that's why they decided to go with Montez Sweat. A second-round pick is the going rate for a really solid to good defensive end, and they have all of the money in the world. Like, there's nothing that they're going to be, or that they're not going to be able to do this offseason because they have Montez Sweat making a ton of money, even if they franchise tag him, that they would have done otherwise. They have $100 million in cap space. They got to spend it on somebody.
Well, and I was kind of I followed Grant Paulson, who covers the Commanders out in Washington for radio, and he basically stated that the Commanders really wanted to re-sign Sweat, and they were offered a third-round pick for Sweat, and they said no. So they forced Chicago to pay the better amount because they wanted Sweat. It sounds like they weren't willing to give a contract extension to Chase Young, so they got a third-round pick for him, and they said this should be good because the injury history has been there with Chase Young.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to go to is if you're a coach and you're looking at a guy, okay, who are we going to trade for? Not just coach, but a GM. You look at a guy, okay, we need a defensive end. Well, there's 2 in Washington that are pending UFAs. Do we want the guy that's been consistent, been healthy, and does not have the baggage of being a freelancer? Or do we want the guy that's had the injury history and we're going to have to overpay both if you get him? Let's go for the Sweat route. And that's what they did. I had no issue with it.
That's the other thing, too, that Grant Paulson said. He said a source said that the team views the trade of Chase Young as a potential addition by subtraction.
Interesting. Somebody on the text line said, guys, all you had to do, though, was sign Sweat in the offseason, and then you get to keep the second-round pick. Yeah, but Sweat's probably not signing there.
Yeah. You get him in so you can hope to sign him.
And you can franchise tag him. He doesn't have a choice. For the next 2 years, you're staying here, buddy.
Then he holds out.
Cool. Then don't play anywhere. Like, those are his choices.
Well, then how does that benefit you, BK, if you're the Bears?
Because he has to play for you. The way that the rules are structured now, he loses out on millions of dollars, and he's not a guy that was a top 5 pick the way that Chase Young was. He loses out on millions of dollars if he doesn't show up to camp. He loses out on even more millions of dollars if he doesn't show up to play. He's going to play.
And hell, you're going to get paid more than you're worth in Chicago.
Yeah,
it sounds great.
I think the franchise tag's like $25 million.
Yeah, defensive ends are expensive on the franchise tag.
Did I miss this? Did Montez Sweat sign a contract?
No, he said that he's not. He said he's waiting until the end of the season to decide what he wants to do.
Got somebody on the text line that said, guys, Montez Sweat signed. I had not seen anything about that. Okay.
No, I actually just think I just read something from
I didn't miss something.
Paulson that put that out there.
Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we got to do our football pick-em a day early this week because T-Bone's going to be out tomorrow, so we'll get into that coming up in 15 minutes. I will warn you guys, I hate every pick that was available this week. Every single one of them.
The stakes are super high this round.
If we can make it happen, we'll work that stuff out. But
Well,
we're
if it
going to have a
doesn't, T-Bone
punishment
will
at
do
the
it.
end of the month, no matter what. So we'll get into that coming up in about 15 minutes or so. But next, I am curious, for you on the text line, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. What is the bare minimum that the Cardinals could do this offseason where you would still feel optimistic for 2024? I'm not talking about firing Mo, firing Ollie. Let's be realistic here. What could the Cardinals actually do this offseason where you leave it? It's the bare minimum, and you say to yourself, okay, I think they're going to make the playoffs this year. What would you need to see them do this offseason? We'll give you our thoughts on that and hear from you coming up next here on 101 ESPN. I'll give credit where it's due on this one. I saw yesterday, Kyle Reese on Twitter asked a question that we've been thinking about a lot as well. What is a realistic outcome this offseason that would be, in your mind, the bare minimum for the Cardinals to accomplish that would still have you feeling optimistic for 2024? So basically, what would it be where you're like, man, that is the most boring offseason possible, but I can see how it would work? That is essentially what this question is asking. Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Let's start with this, Alex. Is there a way to accomplish that goal of still being optimistic for 2024 if the Cardinals do not sign in free agency one of Snell, Nola, or Yamamoto, and also do not trade for one of the guys that you can convince yourself is a number one starter? I'm talking about Logan Gilbert, Dylan Cease, those types of players. If they don't get somebody in that category, can they get you optimistic for 2024, or is that the starting point for the bare minimum in your mind?
That's the starting point. Absolutely not. If you don't sign any of those guys or make a trade for one of those guys, you can't get me optimistic for 2024 because you don't have a game breaker. And we've just seen that the Cardinals try and throw numbers at it in the past, and it doesn't work. You're going to need somebody who is in the elite conversation, and by that I mean who's available, because we all agree nobody's really in the elite conversation among this class. But if you don't get anybody in this top tier, then it's a failed offseason, in my opinion, because you're spewing out false optimism that this team's going to be good when you're throwing guys who are probably 2s and 3s to be a team that can help you win a World Series.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, because I was just thinking, like, okay, if they're going to do like the Cardinals of Cardinals off seasons and do the bare minimum, and they don't go top tier, I don't think I would go into the year telling the fan base when we're there at opening day going, this is a playoff team. I'd probably be going, I have no idea what this team is. Because I was thinking like bare minimum of like Sonny Gray,
Eduardo Rodriguez.
Or Rodriguez.
Here's my thought process here. Eduardo Rodriguez, Sonny Gray, Seth Lugo. That feels like in a previous era of Cardinals baseball, a year ago, if they had the exact same issues that they do currently, I could totally see that kind of an offseason for them. You're talking about like $18 million for Rodriguez, $20 million, but on a shorter-term deal for Sonny Gray, and probably like $10 million per year on maybe a 2-year deal for a guy like Seth Lugo. You're getting out of there spending roughly $50 million, and all of them are more than reasonable pitchers, by the way. They're 3 of the 20 starters in all of Major League Baseball this year that threw at least 145 innings and had a sub 3.6 ERA. Those guys were really, really good last year, but none of them are considered legitimate number one starters. In fact, Rodriguez is probably a 3, Sonny Gray is a 2 or a 3, depending on the year, and Seth Lugo's a perfectly capable number 4 or 5 starter for you. But none of them get you super excited. Rodriguez doesn't have crazy strikeout stuff. Sonny Gray's going to throw 150 innings for you. They all leave a little bit to be desired. I think, to me, that is like the best case scenario without signing or trading for a legitimate number 1. So if that doesn't get you going, I would imagine the answer is they have to get one of these guys.
Yeah,
right?
because those lists that you just gave, like, yeah, cool. You could look at it and say, yeah, these are capable guys to make you a better team than you were last year. Who's the guy that you look at and you say, oh, crap, we got to go up against him?
You don't, but I would say the same thing is probably true of the Rangers rotation. And I'm not talking about with Jacob deGrom. He basically didn't play. I'm not talking about with prime Max Scherzer. He wasn't really available.
The way that Montgomery was pitching down the stretch, teams thought the same that they did against Montgomery.
That could absolutely be true next year of Sonny Gray.
I don't think so.
It absolutely could be. Sonny Gray was better this year than Jordan Montgomery.
Yeah.
Like just flat out 1 for 1, he was a better pitcher. Eduardo Rodriguez could absolutely do next year in the postseason what we saw this year from Nathan Eovaldi. They're not all that dissimilar as pitchers.
And to be fair, I don't think Monty had that resume of, oh, believe we faced Jordan Montgomery. I think it was, Montgomery's just pitching really well. It was not the, oh, crap, that's Zach Wheeler getting ready to start game 1. So,
and I'm not telling you should be excited about this, but I do think like this would be very similar to the Rangers rotation that we saw that just won the World Series. That doesn't mean that's what it's going to look like in the postseason.
And I'll say this, and I'm not trying to take anything away from the Rangers. I think this Rangers rotation is going to be viewed more as a one-off as we get further out from this World Championship. So if that's the case, you cannot build a rotation like that. And that's why I would crush the Cardinals for an offseason like that. Though, yes, they did do what they said and went, hey, 3 starting pitchers. You didn't get that one guy that I say, you know what, though he may not be a number 1, at least you got that 2 that for now you can say he is a number 1 starter.
Yeah, I don't know that I would crush them for this offseason, but I would say you didn't learn the lessons that you were supposed to. I would say this is not changing the model at all. This is just rehashing the same model that we've seen here in St. Louis for the past decade that has resulted in 0 World Series wins and since 2013, 0 World Series appearances. So how could I really get overly excited about this? I don't think you can. So I agree with you guys. That's what I wanted to get to was I think the bare minimum starting point for this offseason, for this team to be considered a quote-unquote success would be you got to sign one of the number 1 starters or trade for a number 1 starter. You have to get Snell, you have to get Nola, you have to get Yamamoto, or you have to go trade for one of those guys that fits into that kind of a criteria. I think that is the starting point, and then we can have our conversation from there. Alex, what else do you think they would need to do for you to have a bare minimum offseason where you're feeling good?
I think the way that they do the bare minimum, and I say, look, this is an offseason that I say was a success. You get a guy who slots into your number 1 spot in your rotation, and then your number 2. That's the bare minimum for me. Like, I'll figure it out with the bullpen. I think Zach Thompson, if he's in the 5 spot, sure. A little worried about the innings, but we're talking bare minimum here. If you don't walk away from this offseason saying we've got a clear-cut number 1, Nola, Snell, Yamamoto, a clear-cut number 2, Gray, Eduardo Rodriguez, Imanaga, then it's a offseason that still is left to be desired.
For me, I would say you got to sign someone in that top tier, the Nola, Snell, Yamamoto. Got to sign somebody in the second tier, the Gray, Rodriguez, those names. To me, you have to sign a third starting pitcher that is healthy and not a guy that is, hey, Tyler Mahle could pitch in May. To me, as much as I don't mind the idea of Mahle, my minimum would be he's available, and like Seth Lugo's, we know for a fact that we can write him in pen as our number 5, and then you use Thompson as the 6. And then I would also throw in here, and I got a long minimum list here, but I would say you got to sign at least one bullpen arm that I would say that can be a 7th inning guy that you slot ahead of either Jojo Romero or Giovanni Gallegos, because I still think that they need to sign 2 bullpen arms. But if they said, you know what, we'll throw numbers at 1 bullpen arm, 1 slot in that bullpen, and we'll run the train between Memphis and St. Louis, and we'll figure that out with a guy that's got options. But you need to sign 1 guy that I can say, you know what, for $5 to $10 million, that guy's going to come in here on whatever that deal is, 1-2 years, and he's going to slot in around that 6th, 7th inning role.
Jesus, your bare minimum is like 6 different things.
But that's like typically I'm not that way with the Cardinals. I typically have more of a want list. Like I still want a center fielder. This is how desperate they are for pitching. Like
you're not wrong.
Their minimum list should be almost what their like ideal offseason would have been like 2 years ago, which was let's just spend a ton of money.
That's why when I asked Michael Gerstadt when we had him on like a few months ago, and he's like, I really don't think our list is that big. I'm like, Michael, I don't know what list you're looking at, but you might need to recheck it because it's pretty big.
He checked his shopping list by accident.
Who are the free agent starters that fit into that tier 2 category that you're talking about? Because like I think it is just Snell, Nola, Yamamoto in terms of free agents that fit into tier 1. Do you guys agree with that statement?
Yeah.
I would say Gray, Rodriguez. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that comes into my mind. Montgomery. He's definitely in that list. Would you put Imanaga there? I don't know if I would, just because there's kind of an unknown.
I think I'd
still put him in that, though.
Depending on the report that you listen to, that you read, he's either a mid-tier starter or a back-end starter. So
I'll go with the latter.
I would
Cardinals will go with the former.
I would say probably not for me, but I don't know, because I'm just going to be totally frank with everybody. I don't know enough about Shota Imanaga to tell you where we should put him in this category. But maybe, depending on who you listen to. Is there anybody else? Would Charlie Morton fit into this criteria? He's going to be 40 years old, but he's always been really good, and you can convince yourself that he is that playoff performer.
No, because I don't know if I want to play the game of, hey, let's hope age doesn't catch up with
Marcus
him again.
Stroman?
I would put him in tier 2. I don't know if he's a Cardinal, but I would.
I'd be shocked if they sign him, but I'm just out of curiosity who else fits into this criteria. Would Kyle Hendricks fit into this criteria for you, or would he be a tier 3 pitcher at this point?
Tier 4.
Is there anybody that I've missed that you guys think should be deserving of fitting into this tier 2?
I don't think so.
I think those were the names.
Kershaw?
No.
I assume Dodger retire, but
or Rangers.
Sure.
And I don't even think he would do it.
Waka?
I think he's tier 3.
Waka.
I think he's tier 3, but like fringe. Like you could probably squint and say tier 2.
Yeah, I could probably put Waka in a tier 2 for me.
Giolito? Tier 2 or tier 3?
I think he's tier 3 because you got to get the best out of him.
I think you guys are right. So, tier 1, you've got to sign one of the following: Snell, Nola, or Yamamoto, or make a trade for the equivalent. Second thing you have to do: sign one of Gray, Rodriguez, Monty, or Stroman, or trade for the equivalent. And then tier 3, we can disagree. I actually think the bare minimum for the offseason is about tier 1 and 2. I don't think it really comes down to tier 3. If they sign Aaron Nola and Sonny Gray, and we disagree on whether or not the guy that they got as the number 5 starter is good enough, then so be it. But if they go out there and get those 2 guys and get the bullpen arm that you're talking about, T-Bone, we're going to be willing to live with whether it's Seth Lugo or Tyler Mahle or whoever it is. If we're arguing about the number 5 starter coming into the season and they've got insurance of a Zach Thompson or a Matthew Liberatore as that number 5 starter as well, we're going to be fine. They can figure that part of it out. The hard part is the front end of the rotation. Yeah. That's really what determines whether or not this can be a successful offseason. I don't think there's going to be a scenario where they go out and get a 5 starter where we say to ourselves, that guy being the number 5 starter means that they failed this offseason. I'd be pretty surprised by that.
Now, we still agree, though, they should sign a 5 starter, right? Because
absolutely, yes.
Though I agree with what you just said of
provide
like if
the upside.
Okay, I was going to say, I agree with we're nitpicking if we're going, well, I like Lugo, you like Mahle. We love Paxton as a show. But
no, we don't.
I think the minimum is you got to sign somebody for the 5. That way you do have that insurance of Thompson and Liberatore as those 6, 7 on top of a McGreevy, Graceffo. Does this change though at all if they make a trade first? Like if they say we're trading Gorman for Cease, do you change what your minimum expectation is for that second starter?
Well, no, because you got your top guy, and now you need to sign another one.
See, I almost, maybe it's just I'm so needy. I almost change what my minimum is and say, okay, well, you just traded for a top guy, go sign a top tier pitcher too, because you just pulled a massive piece from your offense to go out there and let's build that true 1-2 punch that the Phillies have.
I hear. I don't think that I would go that route. Like if you have Dylan Cease and Sonny Gray, I'd feel pretty good about what your front end of the rotation is going to be going into next year. And if you end up lacking offense, specifically with a left-handed punch because you traded Nolan Gorman, which I think they would, you can acquire that at the deadline if you really end up being in a place where you're like desperate to go get that left-handed power bat. Those guys are typically available there.
And I feel like it would change for me because Cease isn't making a ton of money. So it means then you still have money to spend on a tier 1 pitcher.
That's fair. I think it would add more for your tier 3. Is what that would actually do. Is now instead of going out and getting a guy that's like $3 to $5 million or a guy that you're buying low on, I think it might be something where you like maybe you could go get Charlie Morton as your 3rd starter on a 1-year deal worth $17 million. I really like Charlie Morton. I think he's a very good pitcher who ended up getting hurt down the stretch this year. Now that's part of the risk with a 40-year-old pitcher, but his stuff is not like Waino. He's still throwing 95. The guy's got really good velocity and is striking out the world even at his advanced age. So that's the kind of thing that I would consider. Somebody on the text line said, where would Glasnow fit into this? He's tier 2 for me.
Yeah.
I would have him in that criteria with Gray, Rodriguez, Monty, Stroman. He's tier 2. I don't think he can he can't be the top guy that you had this offseason.
I agree because he has injury history. He's like a tier 2 pitcher with tier 1 stuff.
Absolutely.
He's the upside you're going for. But again, if I'm doing that, I need to make sure I have the innings to cover.
Yeah.
And then if I'm doing that move, then the focus becomes, all right, I really need to make sure I get a good 3rd starting pitcher for the rotation.
Yeah, like I don't know that you can do a Glasnow plus a Snell. I think instead what you'd hope to do there is a Glasnow plus a Nola.
Yeah.
I think all of this stuff is intertwined.
Yeah.
Depending on what you do in one bucket, it affects what you do in the next bucket. And that is to your point, T-Bone, about if you trade for Cease, what does it mean for the other moves that you make? I think if you end up trading for Cease, what it's more likely to do, and we can get into this later on, is it's more likely that you now go out there and get a legitimate center fielder. Because now you're probably pulling Edman, putting him at second base. You've got that great infield defense again, and now we can go out to center field and get a guy that actually profiles to be an everyday center fielder for you. So, and maybe that becomes a need instead of a want at that point in time. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we're super excited. We're going to be joined by Darren Pang, former Blues analyst, was on TNT for the call last night. He knows this team as well as anybody nationally. What did he think of what he saw from the Blues last night? We'll get into that with Panger coming up in less than 15 minutes. Our football pick'em going into this weekend is next here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, it's time for our football pick'em this week. It is the start of a fresh slate, which is great for me, hopefully, because I have been punished in each of the first 2 iterations of this plan, Alex. This month, we're starting anew, and T-Bone's going to be out tomorrow, which means we get to do it a day early, which has Alex very upset.
So stupid. Just call in if you're off. I hate making picks on Thursday when this line could change to benefit me.
I'm too
busy. Or change to negatively affect you.
No, you're traveling. You're in a car.
With multiple people. I'm going to be
Tell
talking
them
with
to shut
friends
the
on my
hell
way.
up and let you talk.
No, you just shut up and do your picks now.
Right.
Last time I picked on Thursday, I went 0-3. Oh, wait a minute. You did too, and you did too.
Well, I plan to be better.
We'll do better this week.
Like you,
We're going
I
to do the
studied
exact
for
same
this.
thing next week because I am going out of town next Friday.
Come on!
So well. All right. T-Bone, you can go ahead and get us started with your 1-point pick this week. If you're new to this, by the way, we have 3 picks each and every weekend. The only rule really is that it has to be a side, no over-unders, no prop bets, and the other rule has to be played before we get on the show on Monday. So no Monday Night Football picks. T-Bone, what do you got?
All right, so my 1-point play I'm going to start in the NFL. They got to bounce back. They laid an egg last week. They gave the Panthers their first win of the season, and they're going up against a team that's lost 3 in a row in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I like the Texans -3. I think they can win this game. I think it's going to be one score just like every NFL game. I think they can win this game by a touchdown. So give me the Houston Texans bouncing back. C.J. Stroud's going to play well. Tank Dell's second game back, -3 versus Tampa.
I'll go ahead and go next. That is the one that I have as my 1-point play as well. I like the Texans a lot in this spot. I've been burned by the Texans this year. One of the biggest issues about picking games this week in the NFL specifically is that there's like 10 games where you don't know what you're going to expect out of the quarterback play on either one side or, frankly, both sides. There are so many starters that are down this week or guys that have been benched, guys that you're not really sure who's going to play, like with the Cardinals this weekend. I think there's a chance Kyler Murray plays. And if we were doing this tomorrow, I might take the Cardinals plus the 8 points against the Browns if P.J. Walker starting on one side and Kyler Murray starting on the other. But we don't know that yet, so I'm going to try to be a little more risk-averse. I like the Texans. I like their quarterback. I think they have a significant advantage there.
My 1-point play is a game that I do know what's going to happen at the quarterback, and the guy that I'm picking is going to outplay the other quarterback. So I'm backing the Bengals -1.5 against the Bills. They're a home team. Bengals are now in the midst of a 3-game win streak. Buffalo looks like a lost team on the field, and on top of that, they didn't really do anything at the trade deadline to make them get excited for the second push. So I think the Bengals can win this one, and they're fresh off of that victory against the 49ers. I'd say watch out, Buffalo. So Bengals -1.5 is my 1-point play.
I will go ahead and take this once again.
Son of a... Please tell me you took the Bills.
I also love the Bengals on Sunday Night Football -1.5. I think last week we saw the real Bengals show up finally. They were coming off of the bye week. They were fresh. Joe Burrow looked like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL once again. If you could place a bet right now on Burrow to win MVP this year, I actually don't think that's a terrible bet because nobody else, while he was looking like a shell of himself, really ran away with that award. The Bengals end up going on a run here the rest of the way and finish the way that they did last year, maybe even a little bit better. He's going to have some showcase game. He's going to be in prime time a few different times so far down the stretch. I like the Bengals a lot. I think they win this one. I think they win it by like 7 to 10 points. It's only 1.5-point line.
Such a loss.
I love Cincinnati this week.
Can I change mine?
It is my 3-point play going into Sunday.
Oh, God. No.
Now you removed your hand off the chess piece.
No, I didn't. He cut me off.
Josh Allen is also hurt. He did not participate in practice yesterday. He's dealing with some kind of an arm issue.
So freaking stupid.
All right, well, my 2-point play, and feel free to jump on board this one, boys.
Choo-choo.
How about them Bulldogs? Give me Georgia -15. Man, they're bringing their fastball. All this hype around Mizzou. They're a top 15 program. They might have playoff aspirations. They might win the SEC East. Georgia, not only hears that, then they get placed at 2. That's all the motivation Kirby Smart needs to say, we're being disrespected. Give me them Bulldogs -15. This is going to be a shellacking this weekend. Ugga, here we come.
I've got 15.5. You good with that?
Yeah,
that's
give
what
it
it is
to
on
me.
FanDuel right now.
Give me 30, and I would take it.
Okay, give them 30.
I'll take you the alternate spread.
Give them 30. I want that one. All
Good
right.
for you, man. You put your money where your mouth is. I respect that about you.
I'm torn on this one, but I'm going to go my number 2 play. I'm taking the Seattle Seahawks plus 5.5 against Baltimore. I know they're on the road, but I look at Seattle as a team that feels like they're about to break out, and I look at Baltimore as a team that's still wondering who they are. You've got a new defensive player for the Seattle Seahawks that they acquired. You're looking at an offense that is starting to really click on all cylinders, and here's a little betting tip for you guys. As an underdog, Pete Carroll is 41-25-3, so I'm going to back him as the underdog here, plus
West
5.5.
to East, they're like playing 10 a.m. their time.
Shut the hell up.
This is a loss.
Shut the hell up. That's my 2-point play.
Feel free to grab this on Monday when this is a loss. I won't be here, so please be sure to grab it.
It's not a real thing.
I don't know how to feel about that one because Tanner has told me repeatedly that going West Coast to East Coast
It's not a real
early
thing.
game.
It's not a real thing.
That's a
I like
problem
how
as well.
we're like, hey, here's the 3 best games you should watch in the NFL. And Alex is like, well, I would take these in the pick'em. I wouldn't touch these games.
I'm not going for best games. I'm going for best games to watch. I'm going for games to win. I'm not sure if you remember, but I went 2-0-1 last week to make sure I didn't lose. So why don't you save your ish talk to the guy who can't get wins?
That's still behind this guy's 3-0 and was in first place again.
Yeah, don't listen to anything I have to say. I'm not about to be out here talking trash. I have no trash to talk. My final pick for the week is also another one of the good games. Eagles at home, minus the 3 points against the Dallas Cowboys.
Don't know what else to throw in here. Just can't do it anymore. Every freaking time he picks the same damn picks as I do, and I get them wrong.
Maybe you should come prepared with a couple extras in case this guy steals them.
Listen, if you're worried about the Eagles, I get it. They lost to the Jets. They end up struggling for about a half against the Dolphins. They only beat the Washington Commanders last week by 7. There's some questions about whether or not Jalen Hurts is indeed hurt. He's got a knee issue that he's dealing with. He doesn't want to talk about it with the press. He's dealing with something. This Dallas defensive line is really freaking good. And last week, they looked awesome against the Rams. I think this is a completely different level of competition. I'm going to take the Philadelphia Eagles. I will once again test my luck by picking against the Cowboys. Give me the Eagles minus the 3 points as my 2-point play.
Is this your 3-point
Just
play?
right into my damn spot. You know, I had an extra one to use, but I don't feel it was my one that I was in between on the 1 or the 2-point play because my other one was Pittsburgh minus 2.5 versus Tennessee. I don't feel confident in that one. Philadelphia minus 3, I absolutely feel confident with. God, you suck.
If it makes you feel better, I like that pick. I'm not going with it, but I do like that pick. Mostly because I'm not picking with the 2 best teams in the East playing. My 3-point play. I'm going back to college football. This team almost laid an egg, and this feels like a trap game because they got Michigan coming up. But I think James Franklin gets the Nittany Lions back on track. Going to Maryland, minus 8.5. They're a better football team than they've showed the last 2 weeks, losing to Ohio State, almost laying a stinker against Indiana. I think they right the ship. I like them minus 8.5 on the road against the Terps.
Is that because you saw the Terps lose to Illinois?
Yeah.
And you were
much.
like, yeah, that team's not good.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and take the team that I know is pretty good in Penn State instead.
You lose to Illinois. You suck.
So basically,
I don't care if you got 5 wins.
Okay, so BK's 5 points tied up, and I've got 4 points tied up in my game. So if we both win, then
it's a good spot
5,
for
I got
us.
4. If we both lose,
we're riding together. We ride together. We die together.
Bad boys for life.
Bad boys for life, brother.
God damn. I hate this.
Coming up in 15 minutes, we're diving into the junk drawer. But next, Darren Pang's going to join the show to discuss what he saw from the Blues on the ice last night. Darren Pang, TNT NHL analyst, next here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night, the Blues fall to the Colorado Avalanche 4-1, and they'll be back in action tomorrow night as they host the New Jersey Devils. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 7. This Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your road shop 24/7 at londoff.com, londonfautoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
There might not be a better hockey analyst in North America than Darren Pang. We got to hear him on the Blues broadcast for years here in St. Louis. Now he's doing work up in Chicago, and he's continuing his national work on TNT as well. It was a pleasure to be able to see him last night on TNT as the Blues were taking on the Colorado Avalanche, and it is a pleasure to be joined by him now here on 101 ESPN. Darren, we appreciate the time as always. We sincerely thank you for hopping on with us in what is obviously a very busy schedule for you. I want to start here. You have the perspective now that is a little different than what you had previously, where you could take the 10,000-foot view on the Blues and tell us what you're thinking about this team just without having to see them on a night-in, night-out basis. What is your perspective of this Blues team through the first 8 games of the season?
Well, I mean, I'm seeing a little bit of what we saw last year, which was kind of teasing in some aspects. It was there were moments where I thought last year between the benches, boy, this team's going to turn it right around. And then there was other games that there just was no fizzle, there was no bite back. And I know I like to say a little spirit in the night, a little gumption, but I mean that's what this game is all about, is not going away. So I think those inconsistencies are still something that's plaguing the team. They can go into Calgary and win. They can go into Vancouver, although there were some penalties there that, as I watched that game, I'm like, oh boy. I mean, that puts you on your heels when you take a penalty 17 or 18 seconds into the game. But so all that being said, I think that's my best analysis. I've been trying to figure out what kind of game they want to play or have to play consistently and have everybody on board to play that way. So does it start with 5-on-5 and keeping pucks in the offensive zone and grinding down low? Does it start with maybe a couple of power play goals to get the confidence going? Because it's obviously been a big struggle for the Blues so far this year.
You know, Panger, when it comes to the inconsistencies, last season we just saw defensively this team looked lost on the ice, but offensively they could score goals. It seems like it's flipped this season to where defensively they do look better than what they did last year in front of Jordan Binnington, but the offense has just gone silent. Why do you feel like that happened?
Yeah, what a flip-flop. You're right. I mean, it's been encouraging to see Colton Parayko, play a harder game in front of the net. And then, and again, even last night, I mean, the type of quality chances that Colorado generates is almost not fair because it's just so hard. They move it down low. They punt it to Makar. Makar dances the line, and he shoots it or he sends it to one side for a one-timer, or he's got Rantanen in front of the net. I mean, it reminds me, honestly, of the old Edmonton Oilers days and how it can put you on your heels. But all in all, I would say for me, I would take my druthers on a harder defending game and playing meaner in front of my net, and eventually the offense will come, rather than have a lot of fancy offensive plays where it's not hard on pucks, but you're making these great little rush plays and dancing at the blue line, and you're soft in front of your net. Because you can't win being soft in front of your net. You just can't. But in the playoffs, or if you get down to the crunch, you can win 2-1. And that's what it's all about. And that's what the Blues did in 19. If you've got a tough defense and your goaltending is able to see pucks and get some protection, then I think the offense will come up big when it needs to come up big.
Panger, I think you saw last night one of Robert Thomas's best games that he's played so far this season. You know what the potential is with that guy. When he's on his game, what's going right for him? What did you see from him last night that hopefully can sustain now?
The thing about Robert is he's an elite passer, and last year proved that. He was one of the best slot successful passers in the NHL. So if he button hooks wide and goes out towards the hash mark, he'll find somebody in the slot. So the players have to be ready for that. But, last night I thought getting into the interior was better. last night for Robert Thomas. I still think he's got so much game. He's got such a great brain and hands. But I guess the first thing that I noticed is getting the puck towards the net. It ends up being a goal with Buchnevich making a really great screen in front of the net. And then obviously, you know, he's asked to be a leader. He's asked to play hard in all areas. He's asked to win board battles and come to the bench exhausted. And that's going to be essential for Robert Thomas to continue to evolve that way and be an elite player in this league. So, you know, that was what I saw last night, a little bit more in the interior.
We're talking with Darren Pang on BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. He was on the broadcast last night for TNT, Colorado, and St. Louis. Panger, through the struggles last season, Doug Armstrong labeled it, you know, we're entering a little bit of a transition into a new era. He called it a retool, and he said, you know, he'd like to be like the LA Kings, that we're turning this thing around back in the playoffs in about 3 years. After seeing them in that game yesterday, does it feel like they're on track still in that retool that Doug Armstrong has talked about?
That is always tough to say. I mean, you know, I know the vision of Army and how he can, honestly, he's one of the very best in the NHL at kind of compartmentalizing, you know, emotions versus where we're at and seeing where the prospect pool is and how long they have to wait and how many players are on the roster right now that are just, you know, they're maybe a cut and paste players, if I can say it that way, you know, meaning, you know, that who knows where they're going to be at the end of this year, come the deadline, or who knows if he's going to commit to some players to begin next year. So that would open up a lot with the cap going up and the free agent pool going younger. I mean, that's where I look at Army is you know, almost what he did when he traded you know, Yuri Laterra for Braden Shen, when he traded the picks to Buffalo for at that point. Not or in his prime or not yet in his prime of Ryan O'Reilly. So I could see Army evaluating, you know, the current roster, not players on long-term deals, but the current roster of players on single-year deals and just deciding that that's not going to stick or that is going to stick and going forward that way. So, I mean, you could possibly see a completely new 5 guys up front for next year after free agency and after the draft and what have you. So that's, to me, where Army and his staff are really good at doing that.
Panger, last season we got about 10 games into the year, and Doug Armstrong came out and he had that press conference where he answered all of the questions because he said it's my turn to now step in front of the mic and answer any questions you may have. At the time, I thought, man, this feels a little premature that this team's 3-7, sure, but it's still going to be a good team. And obviously, I was incredibly wrong about that. They kind of had a good feeling of what that was going to be, and it just never got back on the tracks. When you are evaluating teams around the league, how far into the season do you feel like you need to get before you have a feel for what they're going to be that year?
That's a good question. Most people say just following, you know, Thanksgiving, sometime in maybe early December. I mean, you've been at it, you know, once you get into the beginning of December and you know, let's face it, you've gone through training camp, you've gone through the preseason. You've gone through enough games to say, okay, well, listen, this team is not, they're not coming together. They're not playing hard together. They're not battling hard for one another. The same players that were scratching and making healthy scratches, they're returning to the lineup and they're not giving it. I think it's quite easily middle of December to find out where your team is at, to be quite honest with you. And people might say, well, what about 2018-19? Well, I'll tell you, in 2018-19, as I was between the benches, I said it a few times. All I said was, when this team decides to check their ego at the door, this is going to be an unbelievable team. And that's kind of what happened then. It wasn't a lack of effort. It wasn't a lack of bite or lack of wanting to win. It was just that there was more added players that were getting assignments that the current roster wasn't getting, and there was a little confusion. Once they figured that all out, and once Alexander Steen, you know, put himself in a position to move up and down that lineup and everybody saw what he did, that's when they checked their egos at the door, and that's when they became a great team. But you can tell night in and night out if there's that togetherness, and then there's that camaraderie to say, we're going to do whatever it takes to stick together and play hard together. So I would say middle of December is the time that you figure that out.
And Panger, final question that I've got for you. I don't even like asking the question. We push back on it all the time, but I wanted to get your opinion because you know the man well, you know this team well. We get a lot of listeners that text in and say, hey, Craig Berube is part of the problem here. He's not the right guy to get this thing back on track. When you hear something like that and you know what this team is going through right now, how would you answer the question of, is Craig Berube the right man to keep this team on the rails and then eventually get them back on track and get them back to the postseason?
Well, that's part and parcel. There's two ways of looking at that, and I understand the fans' frustration, but it's also the evolution of what kind of players are being developed, whether it's in the NHL or in the system. And I mean, Craig Berube, as we well know, is a heavy player. Get pucks down low. Don't waste shots from the outside. Hold on to pucks, be strong on them, and then pump them back to the points. And, I mean, I can be watching a game and tell you exactly when Craig Berube's a happy camper and watching the way the team plays. I mean, there's no denying that. But, there are a lot of young players around the NHL, and the Blues aren't the only team that has them. They come from different mentalities. They come from a fancy little go through the neutral zone play, and if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, they don't necessarily want to come back hard in their own zone. They don't want to, they don't want to battle for the red line to get it in deep or battle for the blue line to keep pucks. And coaching's tough right now. I mean, you can't be as hard on these players. You can hardly sit them down. Your GM's going to have the agents down his throat calling them, and you've got to be nice and gentle to a lot of these players. I mean, it's a different way. So what I can say to the fans is, we've been lucky in St. Louis to have Craig Berube. And if his time comes to an end, just think of the great things that he's done with the St. Louis Blues. He's trying everything he can possibly try to do it and get to the players and create the kind of environment that he wants to create with that team. And so always tough when you have a transition and a different style of players.
Panger, you're always the best. It's great to hear your voice. It was great to see you on the call last night. Have a safe trip back to Chicago. All the best to you and the family, and we look forward to seeing you in St. Louis real soon.
I look forward to it as well, December 23rd.
That was Darren Pang joining us here on 101 ESPN. Huge thanks to him for hopping on as always. Alex, the biggest thing that you took out of that conversation with Panger was what?
It was kind of his last statement there on Craig Berube, and just the tone that he had with it. Look, Panger doesn't know anything on that side of it. This is all hypothetical. But, man, the way that Panger sounded like was, look, Craig Berube has been a phenomenal coach with the Blues. He got the best out of a group that no other coach was able to do. But it just might be to the point where right now you're wondering if he can get the best out of these guys. And the way that he phrased it to where, you have a coach and you look at the development of players and how they develop with that coach. You look at the system and you look at the roster you have in place and you decide what's best. So who knows what's best, but that's what I took away.
I think the question with Berube and this team that has been assembled, this roster that's been assembled for him, remains what it has been at all times. Can he win this way? And this is not a shot against Craig Berube. I continue to believe that Berube is a really good NHL coach who will be immediately one of the most sought-after coaches on the market, if not the most sought-after coach on the market, if he were to be let go here in St. Louis. Somebody would potentially fire their coach to hire Berube because he's that good. He's the Stanley Cup winner as recently as a few years ago. The question, though, is, can you win with guys like Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou and Brandon Saad and Jakub Vrana, and with this style of defensive core that is more puck movers than it is stay-at-home defensemen? And if the answer to that question is no, because it is harder to move the players than it is the coach, a lot of the time what teams will do is change the coach to find out, okay, if you can't make it work with these guys, let's see if the next guy can. And the answer might be no to anybody. Like, the answer very well may end up being, yeah, the players are the problem. And you fired a really good coach because you messed up with the players. And we might look back 3, 4, 5 years down the road and say, oh, boy, man, they really messed it up there. But that's what they have to determine this year is this a player issue? Is it a coach issue? Is it a little bit of both? And if the answer ends up being either a coach issue or a little bit of both, they might have to end up changing the coach,
Unfortunately, that's the easy route to go with this one. But, I mean, the reality with this one is he's the right coach. You just got to get through the bad contracts that you're in right now with the roster you have in place so you can develop this roster a little bit more towards Berube. Guys like Dvorsky, guys like Jimmy Snuggerud, those seem like more Craig Berube type players. But the problem is
3 years.
You're 3 years away. I mean, they'll probably be playing on this team maybe next year or 2 years, but they're not going to be effective until about 3 or 4 years. And for the people, we got a text coming in, a couple of them that are saying way too much inconsistency with this team. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, folks, but the inconsistency you're seeing right now is going to be the inconsistency with any coach you bring in. This isn't a coach problem. This is just a on-ice issue that the Blues have gone through in the past with Mike Yeo. They went through it before Ken Hitchcock. And if you fire Craig Berube, you're going to be right back in the same spot.
Now, that doesn't mean it can't be fixed by a new coach. Like, maybe if they run a different style of system, like, it could look different and the results might end up being better. I don't know if that is or is not the case. I don't know how anybody can tell you either way. But this is the system that they're running right now, and with this current group of players, it's clearly not working so far. All right, coming up in about 15 minutes or so, would you be interested in the Cardinals adding a center fielder this offseason? And one of the numbers nerds, Alex, I thought had a really interesting read on Aaron Nola versus Blake Snell. I want to hear your guys' reaction to that. We'll get into it coming up in about 15 minutes. The Junk Show is next here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. T-Bone, what do you got for us today in the junk drawer?
So today, the Atlanta Falcons announced a new special. I guess they must do this every week for every home game. A new special meal, and it's got kind of a St. Louis flavor to it.
Is the McRib back
this week? No, but it does deal with ribs.
Oh,
and I said Falcons, not McDonald's.
So.
They have a Chick-fil-A in theirs.
Yeah,
down there.
It's not open on Sundays.
Correct.
Even on, hold on. I know they're not open on Sundays, but they're not open on Sundays in a football stadium?
Yeah.
Well, it's Sunday, man.
So when do they operate in the football stadium?
Saturday.
Well, when they have other games there.
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A
okay, I
Bowl.
guess that makes sense. So for 18 out of the 52 weeks, they're like, nope, sorry, no. When it's going to be as packed as you can ask.
That's been going on for 4 years now. Ever since the stadium opened.
No, I get it. It's just
I can't open on a Sunday, man. It's the entire.
Let's put one of our restaurants that don't open on Sundays into a football stadium.
They should have a Hobby Lobby there too.
Do they not open on Sundays? I don't go to Hobby Lobby that often.
My wife does.
My wife does too. I don't go. I'm going to Hobby Lobby. I'm staying home. Sorry,
Anyways,
Atlanta Falcons.
This new special item that they've got, limited edition item. First off, it comes in a bowl that is shaped and looks just like Mercedes-Benz Stadium, where they've basically just cut off the roof of it, and that's where they put.
Is
your
that like
meal
something you take home with, like a souvenir?
Looks like it.
That's
It looks
cool.
kind of cool.
That's pretty cool.
But so then what the meal is, and it's got a St. Louis flavor to it, it is a full rack of St. Louis-style ribs that are stuffed with mac and cheese.
Ew.
And then the rest of the container that is still around there where you got these ribs surrounded is filled with kettle chips. I'm in.
Sounds fantastic.
For $35.
No, I'm not about
That's
ribs.
a full family.
Yeah,
I'm not about
I'm
ribs.
in.
You don't do ribs in public, man. You do ribs at home.
At a football game?
Yeah, you don't do ribs in public.
I mean, your other options are like nachos or a
Burgers?
greasy-ass cheeseburger.
Or a hot dog.
Yeah, it sounds awesome.
Yeah, no, I'm not in ribs. You don't do ribs in public.
Now, I'm not
You look like a mess.
I would not do this if it was at a Cardinals game in the middle of July.
Yeah,
That
agreed.
sounds terrible. But at a Falcons game, indoors?
See, I would probably do this. Like, you get there, you go in 30 minutes before kickoff, you try and find a spot, and you eat these before you go to your seat.
No.
I'm in.
Well, I would eat them at my seat.
Oh, see, I wouldn't do that.
You're even a
but-
bigger slob than I thought.
Yeah.
You're gonna barbecue
So you
everywhere.
got to balance it on your leg.
Yeah,
Not that.
come on, man.
Where are you eating it? Have you been inside of a stadium before? Good luck.
There's areas you can sit down at in
At a
stadiums.
stadium? No, there's not.
You don't eat
Yes,
rib.
there
You,
At a
is.
football stadium?
Yeah.
this is like when you don't eat steak.
You think they just
The
have a bunch
concourse
of?
area?
You think they just have a lot of tables?
Yeah, they
Sit-
typically do.
Yeah, most stadiums do.
Yeah, they typically
Have
have like
you been to a
side
football
tables
game?
that you can stand at. Have you ever
Chiefs
been
Stadium
to a
definitely
football?
doesn't have that.
Well, they should upgrade.
Well, probably because they're paying Patrick Mahomes all the damn money and they
Yeah.
can't afford the tables.
Yeah, hell, they should cut Mahomes so they can get new tables.
I don't believe this.
Someone said
I'm
things.
sure that's a thing.
someone
I mean,
said-
I've never been to Mercedes-Benz, but I'm sure they've got that.
Someone said
that's a common thing.
Things I hate to say. Alex is right. Yeah, you don't eat ribs out in public, especially if you're sitting in a seat where you're crammed into
Totally
a little
disagree.
area.
I've come up with the perfect way to find out if I found that special someone. You know?
Do you know how
First
much of-
date, eat ribs, and if they go on a second date,
Fine,
they're
at a
in.
restaurant. Fine, not at a football. You know how much of a piece of you know what you are if you're sitting next to somebody and eating a rack of ribs?
Oh
No,
man, they
I'm-
have like legit nice restaurants in the stadium.
Yes.
That's crazy. Like a sit-down area.
Arrowhead's just coming up from behind right now.
Man, they should probably upgrade Arrowhead.
No. This is
They
trash.
have like this kind of stuff at like Busch Stadium too. So like I thought it's
have
like
this at
common across
Enterprise
all
Center, yeah.
stadiums. Yeah, where you can just like get your food and then there's a bunch of tables that you can go sit at.
Yeah, this is trash.
Not at the Chiefs
You're
Stadium.
the biggest
I've
jerk
been to
ever.
a Cardinals game. That's what I don't understand.
Bad moment.
Clearly.
No, you just went to it's a bad stadium all your life.
It's actually an excellent stadium.
Well,
if
it
you guys
doesn't
have
sound like
I
they
don't
don't
want
have
to go.
side
I
tables.
can't have ribs there because I can't sit at a table.
Someone said, and now we know why Tanner is single.
All right, coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we'll play a game of Believe It or Not. T-Bone's leaving tomorrow. He's getting one more opportunity to be able to belt it out over the air. We'll do that coming up in about 15 minutes or so. But coming up next, guys, a nerdy nerd has an interesting take on Nola versus Snell, and I think it explains why some of the projections are lower on Snell than we might otherwise anticipate. We'll get to that next year on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK. You just couldn't pick a worse time to sell your home than right now. Sure, it's worth a small fortune. That's all great, but are you really going to swap your 2 or 3% interest rate for 7, maybe 8% on a new home? Probably not. You don't have to do that when you get the Get Paid and Stay program from Truehold. With the Get Paid and Stay program, Truehold will buy your home right now at its best current value, and you get to bank all the cash and continue staying in your home until those interest rates come back down, or just as long as you'd like. It's totally your call. Plus, you won't have to pay property taxes, you don't have to pay insurance, and you don't have to pay for any of the upkeep anymore. Truehold will pay all of those expenses as well. Learn about Truehold's Get Paid and Stay program by calling 1-855-300-9993, or you can visit them at Truehold.com to learn more about the smarter and faster way to cash out on your home's full value without having to move. That's 1-855-300-9993, or visit them at Truehold.com. He's Alex, that's T-Bone, and I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. So as I opened up The Athletic earlier today, Alex, I saw Keith Law had a piece out, and I said to myself,
I'm going to close this.
Gotta read that one. Gotta read that one. He wrote about the top 50 Major League Baseball free agents. Shohei Ohtani is the headliner, but the depth of the class is, quote, weak, end quote. So he has Shohei Ohtani is the number one free agent. We don't have to talk about him here in St. Louis. He doesn't pitch this upcoming season.
He's not a number one free agent anymore.
He's not an option here in St. Louis. Turns out if you don't pitch, you ain't coming here. Cody Bellinger, he's not an option for St. Louis either. But at number 3 on this list, he has Aaron Nola. And I thought what he said about Nola in his write-up was interesting, especially when you compare it to what he had to say about Blake Snell. He said, quote, I think Aaron Nola is a hidden ace. Someone who will take off for whoever signs him next, and shame on the Phillies if they aren't that team, even though he might end up in the $25 million range as opposed to the $30 million range that he's likely to be worth, end quote. So Keith Law, who is a nerdy nerd, loves the numbers.
Nerdy nerd.
Is looking at the numbers, looking at the players, scouting, and saying to himself, that guy is going to be an ace for somebody. And if the Phillies let him walk, it's going to be a mistake, and he's going to get paid less than what he's actually worth on the market. Then he continues. He goes down the list. He continues with his rankings. Again, number 3 was Aaron Nola. Number 4, Yamamoto. Number 5, Sonny Gray. Number 6, Jordan Montgomery. Number 7 on his list, behind Montgomery, behind Gray, behind Yamamoto, behind Nola, finally is Blake Snell.
Trash.
Here's what he writes. Blake Snell is a good pitcher, but he's not a number one starter or somebody who can project as a sub-3 ERA moving forward. He also has not been very durable in his career. If someone is going to pay him to be a mid-rotation guy, they'll capture some of the upside in his healthy years to make up for the years where he can't pitch as often. But if he gets paid like a number 2 or better, he probably won't end up producing up to that level of his contract, end quote. Those are two very different write-ups on Nola versus Snell. And those are the two guys that we've spent the majority of our time talking about. By the way, he has Eduardo Rodriguez at number 8 on this list. So of the top 8 players, I think it is 6 of them are starters going into this offseason. Guys, what do you make of what he says about Nola versus Snell? Where he says Nola is a hidden ace. He's going to outperform expectations for his next team. And he says Snell is a guy that's probably going to be paid like a number 2 starter, but shouldn't be. What do you make of that?
I agree with the Snell part. I'm very skeptical. That's why when we talked yesterday, like the fact that it's dipped down from 30 mil makes me a little bit more willing to dive into it. But it does make me nervous with Blake Snell because I don't know if that style is going to mesh well because of the Cardinals situation, but I also don't know if the longevity of that contract is going to match. I'd push back on the Aaron Nola hidden ace, and he's going to outperform expectations. I am concerned about the mileage on that arm. Now, he's found a way to keep himself healthy, but, I mean, we are talking about a 30-year-old that you're bringing in for 5 to 6 years and going to say, we need you to be our ace. How much of his success has been covered by having Zach Wheeler? That's the one part that I would say, I don't know if I'd push back on that. 30 mil makes me nervous with Aaron Nola, just like it makes me nervous with Blake Snell. But if you're telling me I got to pay one of them 30 mil, I'm going to back what Keith Law said in Aaron Nola.
Yeah, I disagree with the Nola thing, too, because I don't think he is an ace. I think, if anything, you're overpaying Aaron Nola if you're giving him $30 million to...
Well, to be clear, he said 25.
Yeah.
Still, 25, 30 mil... 25 is not an overpay. 25 is about where I think the market is. If you're going above that, then we're starting to get into the range of an overpay. I think Nola is not a secret hidden gem as an ace for a team. I think he's a number 2 starter that can play up as a 1 for a team when need be. Like I think the Cardinals would potentially still be searching for a number 1 starter even if you had Aaron Nola. I think what he's writing up about Blake Snell, and if this is how baseball is going to view him, whoever gives him the contract is going to get a steal. I really believe that, because if his market's not going to develop, and this is another write-up that we're seeing that is like, whoa, cautious with Blake Snell. Man, number 2s don't win 2 Cy Youngs. That's a number 1 guy that definitely has the upside as pitching as an ace. Like, I would say, if you flipped those write-ups and you told me this guy has a potential as a number 1 and that team's going to get their steal, I would have assumed Keith Law was writing about Blake Snell because he's just got better stuff. And though, yes, he has had years where his ERA is in the 3s, that's a number 2 starter probably. But, man, when he is right and he is healthy, you're going to see it again. He's going to win his 2nd Cy Young. You don't win 2 Cy Youngs by accident. So I just disagree with Keith Law's assessment. I think somebody's getting a steal when they sign Blake Snell.
I think why he's doing this, like the reason why he is believing that Aaron Nola has more in there than what he's shown so far in Philly, is because of his fielding independent numbers. Now, I don't know if these are going to be realized or not. They may end up going to the next team, and like we just look back on it and say, yeah, when he was in Philadelphia, he was just always a guy that underperformed relative to his fielding independent numbers. That's totally possible because, as you said, Alex, he's going to be 31 years old, and he's not the same pitcher that he was when he was 27 with those underlying numbers. But in his career, or since 2018, excuse me, he's had a 3.7 ERA and a fielding independent of 3.3. In fact, his fielding independent number, which is, for those that don't like the nerdy numbers, it's basically, hey, if you were pitching in front of a neutral defense, not good, not bad, what would your numbers be expected to be in that scenario? His numbers are exactly the same as Blake Snell since 2018. The exact same. Now, the actual numbers are slightly different. Since 2018, Blake Snell has a 3.0 ERA, and Aaron Nola has a 3.7 ERA. Both of those are great, but this has been a consistent thing with Aaron Nola. You look back at 2020, he had a 3.1 fielding independent and a 3.3 actual. In 2021, he had a 3.3 fielding independent, 4.6 actual ERA that year. 2022, 2.5 fielding independent, which is basically what we saw from Snell in his actual ERA this year, and a 3.3 actual ERA. Even this season, he was underperforming relative to expectations. 4.0 fielding independent, which is not great. I'm not trying to sell you that it is, but it's better than his 4.5 ERA from the regular season. I can't explain why that is. I can't. I don't know if that's about his defense behind him. I don't know if that's about the ballparks that he's playing at. I can't explain it. But if that starts to normalize a little bit and he matches more of what the fielding independent numbers are than his ERA has been in Philadelphia, then what he's saying is correct. He will be a legitimate ace because the numbers that he's putting up in fielding independent by year, 3.1, 3.2, 3.0, 3.2, 3.4, 2.54. Those are ace level numbers, man. Almost every single year other than this past one. So if you believe that this past year was a one-off and you believe in the underlying numbers, Aaron Nola is not only the best pitcher on the market, he's by far the best pitcher on the market.
See, it would be one thing for me if it just happened this year, but it's really 2 of the last 3 years that his actual numbers, have not lived up to what the FIP was that you said.
It's every year.
Yeah, but like 2 of the last 3 years have really been kind of an alarm bell year for me, where the ERA spikes above 4. Like if it was just this year, I could totally understand that whole argument, and I could go, you know what? Yeah, I think you're probably right. Weird year, stuff happens. You're going to get a blip on the radar. The fact that it's been 2 of the last 3, that's where I would say, okay, that's where it is a little bit alarming.
Makes
for
you
me.
Go under the hood and wonder what was it. And some of it is home runs. Like a lot of it is the home run ball has really hurt him. In 2021, he gave up on the season 26 home runs. The next year, 19. This year, 32 home runs on the year. Is that just something that's going to be an issue for him moving forward? Is it a product of the fact that he plays in an NL East where these teams are freaking mashing all the time, especially as he's going up against the Atlanta Braves? Is it because he plays in a ballpark that is more hitter-friendly? All of that stuff plays a role in it. If he comes here to St. Louis and you're playing instead of against some of the great teams that have been in the NL East in recent years, now you're going up against Chicago and Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. Is it going to look a little better? I would assume the answer is yes. So that plays a factor in this as well. Either way, I do find it to be interesting that almost everybody nationally that is writing about these things, that either is a scout, has talked to scouts, has talked to front office executives, or has a scouting history like Keith Law does, they're all saying the same thing. Blake Snell, really good pitcher, but it's going to be a lot of risk, and he's not going to get as much as people are expecting him to get. Sayers told us the same thing 2 months ago. Said, hey, he's probably the guy that's kind of going to get less than what everybody's expecting him to. If he ends up getting that $25 million per year, would you guys rather have Blake Snell at $5 and $25 per than Sonny Gray at $3 and $22 per?
I would probably say I'd take Snell. I think the stuff is better. And I know people don't want to hear me go, it's not just stuff, T-Bone. But that guy, he's won 2 Cy Youngs.
Yeah, but how much of that stuff is going to work with Wilson Contreras as your catcher?
I mean, I'm not worried. I'll figure that out. If Contreras if Contreras can't catch Snell, you know what he's not? He's not a catcher. That's the honest point. And that's where the Cardinals would say he's going to be a DH.
If they were, I don't think they're going to do this. So let's say that on the front end. I don't think Snell's going to sign here. I think he's going to sign in a bigger market. But if we just go down the path of okay, let's see what if this could happen though. If Snell was willing to sign here and Nola was willing to sign here and you're John Mozeliak, and that meant, okay, our third starter is going to have to be super cheap. Either we're going to the market and we're signing somebody for $3 million, like a Kenta Maeda, or we're going to have to trade for somebody that's just a back-end starter. How would you guys feel if they went into next season with Nola, Snell, Michaelis, Matz, and then fill in the blank, not anybody that you're going to be excited about, number 5 starter?
Oh, I'd feel awesome about that team. I mean, Zach Thompson is my 5th starter, great. And if an injury happens with Snell or Nola, then I put myself in a bad spot. But I can't plan my free agency around the injuries. I'm going to plan what I can get the best from. So if you're telling me I get Nola and Snell, yeah, I'm all in.
Yeah, I think I would be in on that because I think you're getting the best innings eater on the market and you're getting the best stuff on the market. And I think you have that 1-2 punch that I just mentioned in the earlier segment. You now have your version of Wheeler, Nola, and in fact you have Nola. You just have Snell as your Wheeler, and you hope that he can live up to what you saw this year and really the year prior to that. So I'd be all in on that.
Also, if you're learning a lesson from the Rangers from this past, I guess, 2 off seasons ago, they went out and said, we don't need 1 shortstop, we need 2. We need our middle infields. We need to fix that right now. And we're not just going to go with some guys. We're not going to go get Dansby Swanson this past offseason. We're not going to go get Trevor Story. We're going to go get the 2 best guys that we can find that are good offensively and defensively. They complement each other, and one of them is going to be willing to play second base for us, and Marcus Semien. And oh, by the way, they play every day. Like, they have everything that we want them to be, and they're going to be leaders inside of that locker room. These are the guys that we're building around. If they went this route, the Cardinals, they would have to be very comfortable with the people that they're signing, obviously, because now you have made a huge bet on those two guys working out over the next 5 years. Because if they don't, if this goes wrong, you're screwed in every possible way. Because there is zero flexibility in the short or the long term if you go this route and it fails. But if it works, if the upside ends up paying off, you have just signed a guy that has the potential to be an ace and another guy that Keith Law believes can be an ace. And now you're going into next season with a couple of innings eaters, guy that's got some top-level stuff, and now we're really talking about a team that can contend in a meaningful way. So I do find it to be an interesting proposition. If he ends up getting less than he's expecting and some of those big market teams don't come calling the way he thinks, maybe the Cardinals can be there waiting in the wings, ready to take him on. For Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Believe it or not, coming up next.
All right, sing it, fellas. My
Better get
throat's
into it,
got a little
BK.
tickle to it. Believe it or not, I'm walking on air. I never thought I could feel so free.
Flying away on a wing and a prayer.
Who could it be?
Believe it or not, it's just me.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Believe It or Not. You give us a scenario, we'll tell you if we are believing it or not here on 101 ESPN. Let's start with this, boys. The other day, the Oakland Raiders in the middle of the night decided to Damn, I haven't done that one in a minute. They decided in the middle of the night in Las Vegas to fire their head coach, and that wasn't it. They also fired their general manager.
Can they fire the owner?
Probably should. Believe it or not, Deion Sanders will be the next head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders.
Oh, I'm not believing this one. I don't think Deion Sanders goes. I think they'll pursue Deion Sanders. I think Deion Sanders says, yeah, no, I'm good. I'll stay where I'm at right now. But it would, man, how crazy it would be if his son gets drafted by Vegas as the new quarterback and they try and get Deion Sanders as the head coach. But I still think he says no.
Surely they're not going to take, is it Shador? Is that the one that's the quarterback? He hasn't been all that impressive lately.
He's considered to be a top 20 pick.
Shadorly, they will.
That's a top mistake.
Get it?
I actually disagree with you. I think Shador Sanders has been really good lately.
I was going to say, I think he's been at least top 5 quarterback in that first round draft worthy.
I wouldn't draft Shador. And I don't think Sanders will be the next Raiders head coach. So I'm not going to believe this.
You were just such a grumpy old man.
Sorry,
I'm the one that
right
gets told I'm grumpy.
The Athletic has Shador Sanders at number 24 on their latest big board.
How many quarterbacks go before him?
3, I think.
I was going to say.
J.J. McCarthy, they've got ahead of him. And I'm going in reverse order, just to be clear. J.J. McCarthy is not their number 1 guy.
Oh, no, he's my number 1 guy.
Caleb Williams and Drake May. Yeah. So he is the 4th rated quarterback in the upcoming class.
Either bad year for quarterbacks or going to get a steal late in the round.
Probably a little bit of both. The other guys that are currently on their top 50, for those curious that might be fans of teams that need quarterbacks, and there are plenty. They have Jaden Daniels also in the top 50, the LSU quarterback. He's a stud, but he's just so small, man. Quinn Ewers is on this list as well, and Carson Beck, the Georgia quarterback, is coming in at number 50 on the list.
Tanner would take all those guys over Shador.
No, I think it's a bad quarterback class.
I'm not going to believe this either. I do not think that Deion is going to take the job, but my God, would it be fun if he did?
Oh, yeah, I would love that.
I would be very curious to see what it would look like.
The frustrating part is I would want to love that team, but God, I hate Mark Davis, so I couldn't like the team.
Alex, what do you have for us today?
Believe it or not, boys, for Friday's game tomorrow night against the New Jersey Devils, we are going to see Torrey Krug in the press box.
I think they will bench the 3rd pair defenseman. Do not think they will do so with, you know what? Believe it.
I was going to say the 3rd pair defenseman is Nick Leddy and Tyler Tucker. Yeah. And Nick Leddy, I thought, had a good game.
I think Tucker's coming out of the lineup, and I think they'll replace him with Perunovich. Here's the thing, though.
Oh, see, I think Bortuzzo goes in for Tucker.
Maybe. I think that if you replace Tucker with Perunovich, I don't know that you're going to want Krug and Perunovich in the lineup together when you're only dressing 6 defensemen. So you're either going 11-7 again, or you're putting Torrey Krug up in the press box. So I'll say believe it.
So here's my thinking here. I mean, it's very clear. Justin Falk was the number 1 quarterback on a power play last night. He played 4 minutes of power play time compared to like 2.5 minutes for Torrey Krug. And if Krug's not playing top power play minutes, what's his role? Because, I mean, you're not putting him out there late in games to close things down. Frankly, that's what Leddy and Scandella have been doing. They've been rotating with Parayko. If he's not going to be on that top power play and have success, that's where Scott Perunovich comes into play. I mean, people have been screaming for that. So I'm actually going to believe this one. I do wonder, now that we've seen one guy that hasn't been playing to the level that they need him to, they've scratched him and Jakub Vrana. Could that be Torrey Krug for tomorrow's game?
See, I'm not going to believe it because I don't think they're going to put that contract up in the press box. I just don't. It's easy to do Vrana 1 year, making, what, like 3.25. You're not even paying half of his salary. Half is being paid by Detroit. So I just don't think they're going to do it. I think it's more likely, like, as much as I think he probably should be up there, I think it's more likely they're going to end up going 11-7. And maybe he just becomes the 7th defenseman, hardly plays, and pretty much gets more minutes. But I just can't see them putting him up in the press box. I'm not going to believe it.
T-Bone, what do you got?
Believe it or not, The Cardinals would jump the free agent market and make a signing before the end of this month.
Believe it. I think they're going to sign Sonny Gray.
Yeah, he'll be signed tomorrow.
Well, he can't tomorrow. We got to wait four more days.
No, you don't. It's already been signed. It's just we got to wait. And the press conference will be tomorrow.
It's signed, sealed, delivered the way that Wingo was with Mizzou.
Yeah.
So it's a fait accompli.
But he didn't sign with Mizzou.
We know, buddy. We know. That's the whole
Does that mean Sonny Gray's signing with Texas?
No, he's going to end up with
Horns
Atlanta.
up.
I could totally see Sonny Gray signing with Atlanta, by the way. That would be a hell of a signing by them.
Yeah, I could see it.
But is he
He's
wanted
from Nashville?
But is he wanted in Atlanta?
It's a fair question. He's definitely wanted here.
There's posters of his face in St. Louis that I know of probably right now somewhere.
Mo's got his jukebox on his shoulder, playing some sort of romantic song
It was
outside
a
of Sonny
stereo,
Gray's
not
window.
a jukebox.
Oh, really?
Do you know what a jukebox is?
Isn't that one of those big things? Yeah, I'm right.
That's
I've
a
seen
boom.
that
Wait,
on
no,
there.
that's a boom box. A jukebox is the big freaking things that you see in diners.
Oh. Yeah, I don't think he's
Is he holding a
yeah.
jukebox?
I've already got the idea for us to do a weekly hit with Sonny Gray next year. It's always sunny in St. Louis.
Okay.
SONNY. And we can just continue that next year during the
First of all,
hockey
way to
season.
steal off of a television show and way to steal off my ideal for Oscar Sundquist.
Yeah, we're going to do that with Sonny as well. Oscar Sundquist. So,
Oscar Sundquist.
We're just going to keep the same imaging. It'll be ready to go.
Good.
It's always sunny in St. Louis. Whether it's the winter or the summer, we got sunny here on BK and Ferrario.
Sonny and Cher. T-Bone can be Cher. He doesn't get that. Go on, move on.
T-Bone, do you think that they're going to sign him before the end of the month?
I don't think so. I think they're going to sign him, but I don't think it's going to be the end of the month. The free agent market takes a long time, and I don't think anything will happen until we get closer.
Who was the first player to sign last year?
Oh, gosh.
Well, there was only one player to sign last year. Free agency. I thought you meant for the Cardinals. I'm like, well, they only did one. I guess you could say Waino.
Because most of the big ones don't have until like
winter meetings
right around that time, and that's December. So
what?
I just hate you.
What? Well, clarify next time.
That's on me.
Jeez,
I don't know who the first
was the next one to sign. You know who signed first? It was the only guy that signed, in Wilson Contreras.
And he was January.
Post winter meetings.
Yeah. So that's why I just don't. In the MLB offseason, like everybody gets all excited, and the free agent market opens, and then it's like nothing happens.
You get 1 week that's like awesome, and then everything else is just boring.
It's not like the NBA where it's like free agent opens or NHL.
Or the NHL.
Boom, 24 hours, everybody signed, all the spots are locked up, and you can end the offseason.
Well, but that's nobody tampers, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Believe It or Not. Guys, believe it or not, Yadier Molina will sign to be a Cardinals coach by the end of the week. By the end of next week.
Sure.
Not like tomorrow.
I was going to say, tomorrow's pretty quick. I'll believe it. I don't know what the coach is going to be. Bench coach, catcher coach, work from Puerto Rico coach. It's going to be something. He's going to be a part of the organization. So I'm going to believe this one.
I'll believe it too.
That'll be the off-season press conference.
Yeah, I'm a little. I don't know exactly what the role will be. I'm starting to wonder if it's not going to be bench coach, because I think if it was a bench coach signing, we would have already heard about it. And this is taking longer than I thought based on all the rumblings that started to happen during the DS series. But yeah, I'll believe that he's signed on to be some sort of coach by the end of next week.
I'm not going to believe it because
it would have happened by now. I think he's going to get signed. I think they're going to make it happen. I think they were waiting on the World Series to make it official. I think he will sign with them sooner rather than later. By the way, last year, Jacob deGrom signed on December 3rd. Taijuan Walker signed on December 7th. Chris Bassett on December 13th. Zach Eflin was the first of the quote-unquote significant pitchers to sign last year, and that was on December 1st.
Yeah, and all those are typically right around winter meetings. And I know I've heard on podcasts and read in articles, a lot of guys like to get deals done before Christmas or right before New Year's. So that makes sense.
When did Steven Matz sign?
December 3rd is the winter meetings this year.
He was November 24th. I thought it was Thanksgiving. Yeah, November 24th is when they signed Steven Matz. The Cardinals have done this in the past, where they did it with him. They did it with Brett Cecil. I want to say
that was a good deal.
Brett Cecil signed with them early in the offseason, November 12th. No, that was his retirement. November 19th.
Well, that was about as memorable.
Yeah, November 19th they signed him.
I don't think you're going to see it till after winter meetings.
So I think what I just heard of this, the common theme of these early signings, we should wait till December.
No, Sonny Gray, man, we want him.
They signed Dexter Fowler on November 29th.
Yeah, well, they should wait till December. They clearly jumped the market in December, and then they really get screwed.
I remember last year they signed Wilson Contreras during the winter meetings. That was on December 7th.
Who else did they sign last year?
Pretty much it, man. Pretty much it. So, I think within the next 35 days, they will have one of these guys signed.
I think within the next 45 days, they'll have one of these guys signed.
Someone on the text line said, so all these early contract signings were just complete garbage? Well, listen, man, they're changing their formula. They're changing their model.
No, they really were.
Everything's going to be A-okay now. All right, coming up next, there was one positive that came out of last night's Blues game, Alex. Believe it or not, there was.
I believe it.
It was Robert Thomas. We'll explain it next here on 101 ESPN.
Darren Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Blues fall to the Colorado Avalanche last night 4-1, and they'll be back in action tomorrow night as they'll be taking on the New Jersey Devils. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 7. And tonight here at 101 ESPN, it's Thursday Night Football as the Steelers take on the Titans, and we'll have pregame coverage starting at 6:30. The Sports Center update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
One positive from the Blues last night in what was otherwise a stinker of a game. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, Robert Thomas looks good, Alex. They switched up the line combinations. He was up there with Pavel Buchnevich, Kasperi Kapanen, who also had another solid game as well. And a decent amount of the night, they were going up against the McKinnon line, and they more than held their own. The Thomas line outshot the Avalanche while the Thomas line was on the ice 9-2. They outscored them 1-0 at 5-on-5. They outchanced them 7-5. Alex, I've been pretty critical of Robert Thomas from what we've seen from him so far this year. A lot of that goes back to what we've seen, obviously, before last night. What changed for him in your mind?
Well, first of all, he's shooting the puck more. I mean, he's got 18 shots so far this season through 8 games, so we're seeing a little bit more on that side of it. But what's changed for him, at least in these last couple of games, is just driving the offense. And I think some of that has to do with just switching up the line combinations. For some reason, and I don't know why it is, you seem to get the best when Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou split up, because it wasn't just that line that looked good. I thought Kyrou's line with Braden Shen and Brandon Saad looked good in the first period specifically. I mean, we would have been talking about a Braden Shen goal less than 3 minutes into that period if he capitalizes on that goal. And that play was solely driven by Jordan Kyrou. But what Robert Thomas looked so good at in that game last night was being the playmaker that Darren Pang talked about with him. And again, it's not so much that Jordan Kyrou can't play, because we've seen those guys at their best, but everybody had a distinguished role on that line. You had the puck retriever in Kasperi Kapanen, who utilized his speed. You had Pavel Buchnevich, who that goal that was scored by Robert Thomas, Buch doesn't get any credit because there was no points for him, but that goal doesn't happen unless Pavel Buchnevich goes straight to the net to take the eyes away from the goaltender. So Robert Thomas, despite us feeling like we just haven't seen that top centerman play, he has put together 6 points so far through 8 games. He's doing really good in the faceoff dot. He's 53.4%. He's going up against the other team's best, and there have been games this season where you haven't noticed that other team's best players, and you're getting shots from them. So really, he's doing everything we're asking him to do.
So the other thing that I wanted to ask you, Alex, because earlier today we heard from Joey that he wouldn't be surprised if there's some changes in the lineup on Friday. He wouldn't speculate on specifically who it's going to be, but it seems pretty clear at this point the team is not overly excited about what they're getting out of Jakub Vrana. They basically mentioned that on the broadcast last night, where they're like, Jakub Vrana, it's another turnover. Team not super happy with what they're seeing from him. Hell, we don't even have to listen to their words. Listen to their actions. They benched him in each of the last 2 games over the weekend. Finally gets an opportunity last night. Looked fine. I wouldn't say looked good.
I think in the third period, they skipped him a couple of shifts, too.
He wasn't a great player for them. Let's just be candid about it. So I think there's a chance, non-zero chance, that within the next couple of weeks, they say, you know what, let's cut our losses here. It's not working. Let's give him an opportunity to go elsewhere. Maybe he can get another fresh start. Let's go with something else here. We're going in a new direction. And that would require them to waive him, which means that they would add about $2 million in cap space potentially. Alex, there is a player that is available right now that is a multi-time cup-winning forward.
Jesse Puljujarvi?
In fact, he just won the cup as recently as, checks notes, last season.
Who won the cup last year?
Phil Kessel.
Vegas Gold. Oh, Phil
Kessel is still available, and he said earlier today to The Athletic that he's more than happy to basically sign with whoever is willing to sign him. I don't think there's a lot of contenders that are reaching out, obviously. Otherwise, he wouldn't have to be talking to Pierre LeBrun in an article about his willingness to play. He'd be talking to teams about his willingness to play. Would you have any interest in signing Phil Kessel if the Blues decided to part ways with Jakub Vrana?
I would, but I think... So there's 2 sides with this one. Phil Kessel brings offense. There's no doubt about it. And the offense provides opportunities to get better on the power play. It helps out some of these other players that are searching for that right offense. Phil Kessel is also slow. Phil Kessel also last season played a fourth line role, which scored 14 points. So that's a really good numbers for a guy who was on your fourth line. But Phil Kessel also does not play defense. So you're essentially getting, minus the slow because Jakub Vrana is fast, but you're kind of getting what Jakub Vrana was. Now, Phil Kessel, I think, is going to play more to the role of what Craig Berube is searching for, meaning you're going to forecheck and try and retrieve pucks. And he's got a really good shot. So, yeah, I would be intrigued with this if it's coming in on a league minimum deal and you explain to Phil Kessel, like, look, we need you to help offense, but you can't just come in and be a defensive liability because we're trying to make strides towards something. It is who he is. And that's why I'm skeptical with it, because if you're trying to hammer home the focus on both sides of the ice, do you really want to bring this in and have him play in your top 6, top 9? I mean, if you're bringing him in and you're putting him in Jakub Vrana's spot, you're playing him with Kevin Hayes. You guys cool with that? How does that benefit you? Now, he's going to play on the power play, so maybe your power play gets going.
So this is the thing. Do I think it's a great decision? No. Do I think that it's changing anything of what you have currently with Vrana? Does he, bring a different skill set to the table? No. It's different.
I think he brings a little bit different of a play because he does forecheck and he can create opportunities out of nothing. He does go to the areas that Craig Berube is asking Jakub Vrana to go to.
And Jakub Vrana is not going to those areas. So if he... I think the first question they have to ask is this. Are any of our young players that are down in the AHL ready to play right now?
And I would say no.
And if the answer is no, if you don't have Zach Dean ready, if Bolduc's not ready, if Gaudette's not ready, if all these guys, they say to themselves, they can't really help us, that's when you then ask the question of, okay, is there somebody available in free agency who can? And the top guy on that market is probably Phil Kessel right now. So if that's the place where you land, I could see how they say to themselves, it's probably something we should explore. Is Phil Kessel going to sign in St. Louis? I would, if 48 hours ago, I've said probably not. I think he's probably going to wait for somebody that's more of a contender to call him. After reading the article earlier today, I think he'll sign with whoever is willing to sign him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it will cost you nothing. $800,000 is the minimum. If you decide to waive Jakub Vrana, you would have that money available to you right now. So I would say, sure. What are you really... What are you losing out on by signing him would be my response. So that's where I currently land on the scenario. I'm not calling for them to do it, but if they decide to waive Vrana, I could see how it ends up making sense for them. Coming up next, we're hitting the BK and Ferrario Rewind here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Coming up here in just a couple of minutes, I'll give you a chance to score a pair of tickets to see Blink 182 coming up at Enterprise on August the 10th. Keep the text line 314-399-9646 close to you. If you are the winner of those tickets, you will get them coming up here in just about 5 minutes or so. Alex, to finish off the show today, earlier we talked about what the bare minimum is for the Cardinals this offseason to do in order to make you feel optimistic going into 2024. I think we're all on the same page. I don't think there's a way for them to make you feel optimistic without signing a Tier 1 starter. And what I mean by that is like the Tier 1 starters that are available. I'm not saying, hey, you have to go out there and trade for Garrett Cole or it's a failure of an offseason, Mo. Obviously, that's unrealistic. But Snell, Nola, Yamamoto, those are the only 3 free agents, in our opinion, that fit the criteria of a Tier 1 starter. If you don't sign one of them, then you have to trade for somebody who does. Dylan Cease would fit into that criteria. Logan Gilbert fits into that criteria. Guy who we've talked about a lot that does not fit into that criteria, though, is Tyler Glasnow. He would be in Tier 2 for us, and you have to sign or trade for one of those guys as well. Sonny Gray, Eduardo Rodriguez, Montgomery, Stroman, Giolito would not fit into this criteria. Glasnow. Those are the types of pitchers, really solid mid-level rotation starters that either have a question with health or a question of consistency long-term. I think that's the starting point of what would make you optimistic about the Cardinals moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, the only way that I'm sitting here talking about this team as, well, they've turned it around, and good job by you, Mo, with this offseason, is if you come away with a legit 1 and 2 starter in your rotation. You have to come away with 2 guys that are night and day better than Miles Mikolas. And I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's Blake Snell or Aaron Nola or Yamamoto or one of these guys that has this opportunity. But if you walk away from this offseason with Sonny Gray and throw in an Eduardo Rodriguez, to me, I'm going to look at that and say, I still think you needed somebody who had game-breaking stuff.
Yeah, and I agree with everything that you just said there. You got to get 2 top guys. To me, you got to sign a 3rd guy as well. You can debate who that is, Mahle, Lugo, whatever. But then you also, to me, another minimum is you've got to go out and you got to get a bullpen arm that I can say at least is in the conversation with Gio and JoJo. That has to be there.
Our text line said, wait, so you guys think that Cease is an ace? I didn't say that. I don't think that Cease is an ace.
I don't think anybody available is an ace.
I don't think that Nola is an ace. I have no idea if Yamamoto is going to become an ace, but it's hard to project that when we have never seen him pitch in the big leagues before. I don't think that Logan Gilbert is an ace. I don't think you're acquiring an ace, quote unquote, this offseason. Zach Gallen, not available. Going out and getting a Garrett Cole, not available. Prime Scherzer, Prime Verlander, none of those guys are available this offseason. So what you have to do is settle for what is out there. And what is out there is a guy that in a game 1 of a postseason gives you a really solid chance. Nola can do that. Going out there and getting Snell, he can do that. Yamamoto, you believe, could go ahead and do that for you. If you're able to go out there and get one of those guys and you add him to this team, you feel pretty good about your chances. You might end up having a guy on the other side in Zach Wheeler who's better than your dude, but you can at least go blow for blow and feel like you've got a fighting chance in that scenario. But no, I don't think any of the guys that are available to you are legitimate aces this offseason because I don't think those guys are out there. Unless you end up trading like Jordan Walker, and I don't foresee or want them to do any of that.
Yeah, you got to be pitcher by committee, but you got to be pitcher by committee with talent at the top of it, not what you had last year.
He's Alex, that's T-Bone, I'm BK. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line if you are texter number 101. And you can tell us the stadium that T-Bone was talking about earlier today where they are having ribs with chips and mac and cheese all on one platter. What is the stadium that will be selling that this weekend? They even have tables where you can eat it at. If you can give us that stadium, if you can give us that stadium name correctly and your texter 101, you are going to see Blink 182 next August. For Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Alex and I will be back tomorrow. T-Bone off for the rest of the weekend. The Fast Lane's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.